Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, a show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes. We're just a couple of deep divers diving deep into content. If this is your first time listening to Pop-O-Holics, we take each episode to go through a topic, a piece of media that we have all consumed together collectively and talk about it. We talk about what we've been consuming for the week. And we do a weekly poll. We got lots of fun activities that you can be a part of. So if I had access to everything, it makes me sound like a millennial douchebag. And to celebrate all this month is Marvel Cinematic Universe. We have watched like 25 films, and we are talking about all things Marvel leading up to Endgame, which is going to be next week's episode. Endgame. Getting real pumped for that. But I'm here. I'm going to be doing that with a few good friends. I'm joined as always by my two co-hosts,
Chris Conkling
and Brian Dupree.
And from the Go Folk Yourself podcast, friend of the show, second time guest, happy to have him back, Mr. Victor Paugh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And, dude, I enjoyed the last episode of Go Folk Yourself. You guys discussed Virginia, and, man, they just have so much love for you. They love when you speak your opinions on that show. And you're a valid member.
They treat you so well.
Always.
So go check out that latest episode. A lot of fun. I listened to that over the...
There's a fantastic radio play at the end of it. So be sure to listen all the way through.
I believe, spoiler alert for your Virginia podcast, it begins with Abraham Lincoln discussing that it's an explicit podcast and then getting shot in the back of the head.
Yes, our explicit warning tags are almost worse than the content in the show for some reason, which is good because a lot of people who don't want to listen to explicit content just turn it off right there. But we still get that download.
Yeah, and then you guys don't really swear that much. I really don't feel like it's that filthy of a podcast. But Dan Barron doing an excellent Abraham Lincoln. I've never heard Lincoln talk, only Daniel Day-Lewis, and I imagine that is 100% accurate to how Lincoln talked. But fantastic job opening the show last week.
Thanks.
So we are talking Marvel movies, but before we get into that, we're going to talk about what we've been consuming for the week. Vic, since you're our special guest, let's start with you. You've been playing some video games and watching some TV. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Katana Zero is a new indie game I just picked up. I just finished it today. It's a fantastic story for a side-scrolling action neo-noir game. Fill in every genre type game in there. It's like if someone took Blade Runner and Metal Gear Solid and made it a pixel art game. It's for the Sega Genesis. It's awesome.
It sounds awesome. It sounds like it has 8-hour-long cutscenes.
No cutscenes. Yeah, the cutscenes were all just text, and you could press A and pick your dialogue really quick. Yeah,
perfect.
All the good stuff, but just as weird of a plot as Metal Gear, without the hour cutscene of weird politics.
It looks like it starts off in the menu screens on a CRTV. I'm already in.
It's super 80s. You basically, the concept is you're an assassin and you have to it's a one-hit kill type thing. So you have to, it's kind of like a puzzle room with that. And so your hero can manipulate time and go backwards. So if you don't get it perfect, it like rewinds to the beginning of the room. So it even does like the sound effect, and it has like really cool 80s vibes to it. And like, it's like mixed with little hints of RoboCop and other movies in there.
That sounds fun, and that's available on...
What? It's on Switch and Steam on PC. It's like $15, totally worth it. And the soundtrack is amazing.
I'm totally going to have to pick it up for the Switch.
Switch, a.k.a. the indie Steam machine.
Yes, 100%.
Very cool. Now, you've also been watching A.P Bio. If I'm not mistaken, this is a show that stars Robert McCauley, I think is his name, the guy from It's Always Sunny.
Yeah, it's him and Patton Oswalt, and this one had Christopher Lloyd on it.
Sorry to interrupt. Isn't it Glenn Horton or Howerton?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I was.
Okay, that's right.
I was mixing up McClaney and the last name of the other dude. Sorry, continue. Christian got something wrong, and we're 2 minutes into the podcast. Go ahead.
No, it's just I was just catching up on the season, so that's pretty much my week has been playing Katana Zero and just catching up on some shows, and obviously Game of Thrones. But I'm sure everyone has that on their list.
What would you? Is A.P Bio a good show?
Yes, it's a dark comedy mixed with like a sitcom. So it crosses that line, and it's really subtle character building. Like the whole cast is amazing. Like it has this amazing stand-up comedian, like Patton Oswalt's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But the supporting cast, like the kids in the high school, steal the show constantly.
Oh yeah.
and it's really authentic.
Very cool.
I was texting with Victor earlier this week about this show. Mickey and I love this show. Like the easiest way I would describe it or like recommend it to somebody is, do you like Dennis and Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Do you want to watch Dennis teach and mold young minds for 20 minutes? Then watch AP Bio.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Sounds excellent. Yeah.
Very cool. So that's AP Bio. Is it streaming anywhere? Is it on?
It's on Hulu. That's where I'm watching it.
Cool. So available on Hulu. Cool. Awesome. Brian, you saw Tim Burton's Dumbo.
I did.
I don't think I'll ever watch this movie. Maybe you can convince me otherwise, and that I'm making a mistake with my life and my time. Tell me about it.
Well, Tim Burton, I won't say he's one of my favorite directors, but I tend to always try and see his stuff when it comes out because I don't know, he's obviously huge in Hollywood, plugged into Disney, and I can appreciate a lot of his earlier stuff is what I'm really a fan of. But this movie was great, a lot of fun. It's not a movie that really gets you super emotional. I didn't remember. I watched Dumbo when I was a kid, and I think that movie's like an hour long or something. When I was looking into it, it's like a really short movie.
It's pretty short.
And I know they edited out some stuff that was like racially problematic as well in the original cut, from my understanding. So this movie, I was kind of fresh to the story. I remember the general plot line, but seeing Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito back with Tim Burton, I was like, I'll watch this movie for sure. So essentially, it puts a cool spin on the carnival life. So, and being different, and how back in the day, the carnival and these types of shows were almost a refuge for people who were different and could turn their differences into something they could sell and make people more comfortable with. And it's framed around Colin Farrell's character being a war veteran who used to ride horses in the carnival that Danny DeVito runs. And it's the Medici Carnival and circus. I'm saying carnival, but the Medici brothers circus. And he loses an arm when he goes off to war and can't really ride horses anymore. And we come back, and it's kind of seeing him come to terms with his new disability, and framed through the context of seeing Dumbo, this incredible flying elephant, obviously. The animation in this movie, I'm all in for the Disney live-action animals. These things are gorgeous. The emotion you can see in their eyes is so well done. It really just made me hype for Lion King. All in all, like, I was never a giant fan of Dumbo, but this is a movie that's worth seeing. Maybe not necessarily in theaters, but I'm sure it'll be streaming soon from Disney Plus if it's not on Netflix.
Can I take a stab at Colin Farrell's character arc? Just give me a nod if I'm right. Does he learn to overcome his disability by watching a little elephant fly?
It turns him into a kid again.
Oh, okay.
It inspires everyone.
Okay, all right.
Those big floppy ears are adorable.
All right, I might consider it once we're all subscribed to Disney Plus, and this is part of it. We can watch
Just
it.
who's not going to
Does
subscribe
Dumbo
to
save
Disney
everyone
Plus?
from the horrors of the suburbs? I feel like that's Tim Burton's underlying theme and everything.
I think Dumbo enters the quantum realm and is able to reset time and space back to a time before Thanos snapped his fingers.
We all laugh, but we know 20 years from now that's going to happen. It's going to be a Disney crossover
When all the
with
Disney
Marvel.
universes merge together.
Yeah, Ray from Star Wars flies in on Dumbo.
I'm game.
Dude, that's exactly what I was picturing in my head. That's so weird.
And that's Dumbo, available in theaters now. Cool, Chris. You've been in such a Marvel comic book DC mood lately. All your stuff is DC. You're drowning in it.
I'm so festive. It's all I've been doing the last month is watching all these darn Marvel flicks.
Need a counterbalance.
Tell us, you've been reading some comics. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So this week I read a couple different comics. I read X-Men Grand Design by Ed Piskor. And the cool thing about this comic, Ed Piskor, prior to this comic, is mostly known for writing and drawing Hip Hop Family Tree, which is like a really cool graphic novel history of hip hop. So it goes through basically like the history in this graphic novel form. And one thing I really, really like about his art style is that he uses Ben-Day dots, which is basically like when they were printing comics in the 1950s and 60s, you would get like the multicolored dots in magazines because it was cheaper than using like full color. So he kind of sticks to this like 1950s, 60 feel with his art, which I think really suits the X-Men. You can tell with this book that he's a huge fan of the X-Men series, because what he does is he takes X-Men in its entirety, its continuity, and basically breaks it down into chronological order and like taking different pieces and just putting them in place where they're supposed to be throughout the history and then retelling the entire thing. So if you're a fan of X-Men, but you don't have time to ingest, 40 years worth of comics, this is an excellent way to get like the Cliff Notes version of where the X-Men have been and where they've gone. It's really, really cool. I definitely recommend checking it out. And then the other comic I was reading is something that's currently being published for Marvel's 80th anniversary, and it's called Spider-Man Life Story. So it's really weird that I ended up coming in contact with this book this week as well, because it's also kind of like a historic retelling of Spider-Man's story. It's written by Chip Zdarsky and illustrated by Mark Bagley, who's like an awesome Spider-Man illustrator. If you're a fan of Ultimate Spider-Man, that's like the book that basically got me into comic books. But he and Brian Michael Bendis have the longest run in comic book history as a duo on that one book. He's fantastic. Definitely check him out. Chip Zdarsky is mostly known, from what I know, writing the indie comic Sex Criminals. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But
No,
anyway, Spider-Man Life Story is basically, like I said, a retelling of Spider-Man's history. However, the twist is that instead of Spider-Man and Peter Parker remaining like a 30-year-old man for all of eternity, it starts in 1963 when he gets bitten by the spider as a 15-year-old boy, and then he ages in real time. So each issue is another decade. So far, they've released 2 separate issues, the first being the 60s, the second being the 70s. The one coming out next month is the 80s. But I just thought that was a really interesting take on the Spider-Man character. Like, if we finally get into the 2000s and he's like a 50, 60-year-old man, how's that going to look as far as like his superheroing goes,
Oh, that's cool. My favorite Spider-Man story, Spider-Man Reign, is where he's an old man.
That's a great book.
Yeah. And it shows like the whole city going to crap and everything and him putting back on the mask again.
Yeah, I love that book. In that, don't they? Well, I don't want to spoil that story. Anyway, go check out Spider-Man Reign as well. It's really cool. It's like a cool Elseworlds type story. But definitely recommend Spider-Man Life Story as well. It's a really, really cool concept. And it's not beat for beat Spider-Man's history. They actually tweak some things. And I don't want to spoil anything. Just go check it out yourself. But yeah, I'm deep down the comic rabbit hole this month, guys.
That sounds cool, though. I like that concept a lot. I think there's a lot of fertile ground to like represent the changes in American culture by doing that, and I think that'd be cool. I'd hope it has that.
In the first issue, most of the story is really about Peter struggling with the idea of going to Vietnam, like whether or not he should or should not. Yeah, whether he should or should not go to Vietnam with his capabilities. Like he sees Captain America going, he sees Flash Thompson going. They explore really interesting ideas in this book, so definitely check it out.
That is X-Men Grand Design and Spider-Man Life Story. The Life Story, the run is complete.
No, they only are on issue 2, and it's a 6-issue miniseries.
Okay, and then have they announced how many issues they're doing for Spider-Man Life of Spider-Man?
Oh, I'm sorry. Spider-Man Life Story is the 6-issue miniseries. X-Men Grand Design is almost complete. Ed Piskor is releasing the 3rd book in a couple months later this year, and then it'll be finished.
Very cool. Check those out at your local comic book emporium or on an app. You can do that on apps.
Comixology.
Comixology. Cool. I've seen a couple episodes of the latest season of High Maintenance. This is a series that me and my girlfriend really like a lot. And although I didn't catch the whole season with her, I caught a couple of episodes, and I've always loved this show. This show started as a web series on Vimeo and was picked up by HBO, and they've been through 3 seasons. And apparently the loose plot of the whole thing is it follows this pot dealer who like delivers pot to his customers. But the episodes are rarely much about him. He's just he's what interconnects all these new side characters that really don't get reintroduced a terrible amount throughout the entire series. They're just kind of one-off characters. Sometimes they get referenced or you see them briefly. But it's a really cool slice of life. These things are like 10, 15 minutes each. And really, sometimes really funny stories, sometimes emotionally, sometimes quaint, sometimes non-important. And I love it. I love it a lot. It's really fun. It's right up my alley. There is an episode in the 3rd season called Finger Butt. And I recommend that you don't need, because of the nature of the plot of this show, you don't really need much setup to enjoy it. You can really just finger butt, just a different finger butt. Sorry, that word is just so great. You don't really need to watch anything in order or anything. So if you have HBO Now or Go, or you have a subscription, check out the episode Finger Butt. If that episode works for you in any way, that kind of gives you a handle on the different levels of where the show can go. It has one of the funniest physical comedy scenes I've seen in a long time, and me and my girlfriend were about to fall asleep, and we were just crying, laughing out loud. I've never heard my girlfriend laugh so hard. It is so ridiculous. Essentially, real briefly, it's the story is that one of the stories in that episode is that a veterinarian who's kind of having an existential crisis on what his purpose is decides to start microdosing psilocybin, and it makes his job very interesting.
Oh wow!
So it's really. Have any of you guys checked out this show?
I haven't seen it, but I'm definitely willing to give it a shot.
It's good.
No, I haven't seen this.
It implies that like you'd have to be stoned to watch it, and it is about a bunch of people that use pot. But it does not really one of those things. I don't think you have to be a big stoner. I personally don't 420 it up, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So, cool. So that's High Maintenance Season 3. All 3 seasons available on HBO now. Also on HBO is Game of Thrones. Everybody's going crazy of it. I'll briefly say that I just watched episode 2 today of Season 8. And Game of Thrones, of course, is the long-running crazy epic of different houses, the chase for the Iron Throne. We all know what Game of Thrones is, but it's coming to an end. And this I just want to briefly touch on, this series is the weirdest thing that I've ever experienced in like a running TV show. As most people know, the author of the books, whose name's escaped, George R.R. Martin, has not finished them, but HBO will finish it before him. And I think it's really interesting that we live in a world where the end of this TV show is going to set the bar for what happens in this story. And even if George R.R. Martin never actually watched it, he will undoubtedly be influenced by the outcome of it based on just his fans. So we will never have a pure George R. Martin ending to Game of Thrones. HBO has kind of ruined that, not to their own chagrin. They started making this series like 12 years ago. 10 years ago about. So it's just such a crazy thing, and the show has become something entirely different. I still think it's very fun. I sometimes come across negative of my feelings on the last 3 seasons or so, and how it's kind of sped up, and it's just become this more poppy thing rather than a dense political thriller. And a lot of the most interesting political players in this show are dead. Spoilers. Lots of people die, but I really, really loved the last episode. It was very quaint and quiet, and we just spent a lot of time with all the characters who are normally not together, and they're together right before large. This probably where most characters are going to die next week. It's really, really excellent. It was it reminded me of the to a little more serious degree, but the party scene from Age of Ultron, where they're all hanging out, and it's kind of, you just get to see all these characters interact where they sometimes don't, and take breathers, and that's what I appreciate most about this show is the characters kind of communicating and the political thrilling and stuff. Have anybody else on the Game of Thrones train?
Yeah, I watched the second episode today. It definitely had a lot of great character beats. It was very fulfilling, especially considering what's to come. I know poor Brian hasn't seen a single minute of Game of Thrones.
But he doesn't throw it in our face. Apparently, the internet really wants to annihilate people that are vocal about not watching Game of Thrones.
Well, I see the opposite on my feed of people like, I don't watch Game of Thrones, so I'm just posting about how I don't watch it, and I hope you like your Game of Thrones. And it's like, why? Like, why would you?
It's really obnoxious.
Yeah.
That's cool. I don't go show up on your Facebook, and I'm like, hey, I'm not reading Harry Potter right now.
Yeah.
We had a choice this month, loyal listeners. We were either going to watch all of the MCU films or force Brian to watch over 80 hours of Game of Thrones content. And we decided to opt for the 59 hours instead of the 80. So
yeah, that may have killed me.
You're welcome? I don't know.
How does it feel, Brian, to be an outsider to the Game of Thrones phenomenon?
Just daunting. It's something that I'll probably watch eventually. I will say, to your point about the books not matching up, you won't have to worry because those books are never coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
I can agree with that. I don't think they're ever coming.
I read in an interview a couple days ago that George R. R. Martin said the ending of Game of Thrones on HBO isn't too different from the book.
He told them how it ends, but he said that if they were to do the books, they would do 4 more seasons to put everything he's putting in. But I don't believe we're getting those books at all.
Yep, he's gonna die before he writes that last book, man. I'm sorry to say it, but
He doesn't
it's not
seem
gonna
like a
happen.
super healthy individual based on his weight and his personality.
And he's going all George Lucas with prequel books and textbooks. And he's going all like, I'm diving into the Targaryen legacy, and we're like,
Yeah.
okay.
It's like, dude, just finish the first the first series, man.
But it must be so hard. That seems to be something
Yeah.
that I've been burned on as an artist. I'm not good at finishing stuff either. It's one of my greatest deficiencies as a creator, and so I empathize with him. I feel like kind of bored about writing about dragons.
George R. R. Martin, if you're listening, thank you for what you've given us, but for God's sake, just finish the last book.
Hey man, and I say, hey man, you do you. If you die and never finish telling the story, it'll be worth it. Enjoy your cheeseburgers. That's mean. I shouldn't be mean on George R. R. Martin. That's unnecessarily cruel. All right, moving on. So that was what we've been consuming for the week. And we're going to move on to our poll. Chris, our poll guy, I'm throwing it to you. You're the host of the poll segment. I won't ever take that away from you. Give it to us.
Here we go. We got some polls. And dude, this was a great week for polls. We asked all of our wonderful loyal listeners who they thought played a better Spider-Man, Toby McGuire or the young and talented Tom Holland. Poor Toby. He got annihilated.
He got
no love for Toby
up like
McGuire,
he did
guys.
from Green Goblin. Green Goblin showed up
Toby.
and wrecked him, and there was
You
no
know,
last minute backflip to save him.
I may have contributed to
Impaled.
this by making the GIF we used for our poll, him sobbing uncontrollably.
That's pretty
But,
accurate.
you know,
That's
I
all the
feel like
acting
it's
you
fitting.
get from him in
It's
3
an ugly
movies.
cry. It's not a
Based
good
on
cry.
the results, I feel like it's fitting. So thank you to everyone who participated in the poll. It was 79% Tom Holland to a pitiful 21% Toby McGuire.
I think it was at 68% versus 32, if I'm doing the math correctly. And I was like, let me share it because I know I have some loyal diehard Toby fans on my page, and I was going to be like, hey,
It didn't
show the
save
love
him.
for Toby, and then it just went up.
It did not save him. I think it was like 30 votes Tom Holland to 8 votes Toby McGuire. Like annihilated.
Yeah, it wasn't a good showing for Toby. I think that if Homecoming, the next Spider-Man, Far From Home sucks, we should do the poll again. Give him another chance because maybe he'll have redemption.
I still think he would still do it. He just does it better.
Well,
In my heart of hearts, Toby McGuire is like my Christopher Reeves. Like
Yeah,
Christopher
for
Reeves
sure.
is always going to be Superman because he was one of the first. He was the best to bring it to the silver screen. Toby McGuire was the first to bring it to the silver screen. Spider-Man 2 is always going to be one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. But for God's sakes, Tom Holland is Spider-Man.
I think what
The kid auditioned by doing a ton of backflips.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
that it's that what we had said previous. Big consensus is that Tobey Maguire was a really good Peter Parker. Andrew Garfield was a really good Spider-Man under the mask, physically and verbally and stuff. And then Tom Holland's just like pretty good at both. He's kind of that good happy medium.
Tom Holland's the only actor who's portrayed Spider-Man who decided to actually do a Queens accent, which makes perfect sense considering Spider-Man lives in Queens. Like, no other actor has ever been like, oh yeah, I should have a dialect.
My favorite
I'm
is
from New York.
Tom Holland's Spider-Man's Queen's accent. I think that's one of my favorite accents in the Marvel MCU is when he's trying to be like tough Spider-Man. He's like, yeah, your kid's doing okay. It's like a fake Brooklyn accent. It's very funny. God, show some love for Toby. Show some love for Toby. I think he was great. He's a loser, and I think that's so important. I think Tom Holland's a little cool for school. Too cool for school. He's still kind of a nerd. He's nerdy enough. But Toby is like straight up a loser. And he's silly when he's Spider-Man. Like, he's not any cooler. I mean, he's cooler because he's got superpowers. But I feel like Toby is still like a really
To me, it's the voice. Yeah, but yeah, that's what I would say. It's just his voice just bothers me. It bothered me in the first one. Like, when it's in the mask.
Interesting.
But at that point, we didn't know any better.
Yeah, it's true.
You can always vote on our weekly polls by joining us on Facebook and Twitter and join in on the poll action. Follow us there by searching at Pop-O-Holics. We'll be happy to see you there. So we're going to go to the next part of our show where we're going to be breaking down part 2 of Phase 3 leading up to Endgame. And just a warning, it is going to be spoilerific. We will not hold back. We will spoil all these movies. I'm really bad as a host about letting the audience know that this is all spoiler talk. On our Endgame episode, we will have a non-spoiler section if people can't make it and go see it over the weekend. So feel free in catching our next episode. We will not spoil it right off the bat. But for this episode, we'll be spoiling everything we talk about. But you've already seen these movies, right? Everybody has. We'll be talking all that and more after the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Pop-O-Holics, show about hot takes hotter than pancakes, where we dive deep divers. Guys, we're going to talk. This was the easiest week because one of these movies was in theaters and I had already seen it in the last month. And then the other, one of them is there's a couple really great ones and then one stinker. 2 stinkers, maybe, depending. But we'll find out which is which. You'll have to guess. But again, we're going to be super spoilery on this. And we're actually going to end with Infinity War because that is kind of the movie that leads directly into Endgame. And we're going to take some time at the end to talk about what makes a successful cinematic universe, what the MCU means directly about our culture and how it's changed pop culture and how people see things, how we watch superhero movies, how they're made, what do we want to see from Endgame, and we're gonna list our top favorite 5 movies out of the entire MCU. You guys excited?
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
Oh, yes.
So we begin with, we're right off the heels of whatever the last movie was.
Thor Ragnarok?
Thor Ragnarok, pretty solid.
Yes.
And then we have a cultural smash hit. This was so much more successful than people thought out of nowhere. We were talking about 2018. Black.
I waited my entire life for this. The world's gonna start over. I'ma burn it all.
What happens now determines what happens to the rest of the world.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. Wakanda forever! The revolution will not be televised. Let's have some fun.
So, guys, this is directed by Ryan Coogler, and my God, what a cultural phenomenon. This movie did gangbusters and started kind of like a movement, kind of like, hey, we want more of this as a culture. Hey, turns out there's a lot of black people in the United States who want to see themselves represented in a superhero. Go figure. That's crazy, right? And I
don't think it's just the United States. I think it's the whole world.
Yeah, but I mean, particularly, this made more, I think, domestically than Infinity War, which came out the same year, if I'm not mistaken. And we get Black Panther. And I wanted to start this off with, I actually talked to a good friend of the show, a fellow coworker of mine, Ian Brooker. Loves this movie. His hair looks like Killmonger's right now. And he literally wears the Black Panther necklace to work every other day to work. So I wanted to make sure that he had his voice heard. So I'm going to play right now a little conversation I had with him. All right, so I'm here with my good friend Ian Brooker, and we're here on the Pop-O-Holics podcast, and I want to make sure that we like to gush on movies, we like to give love to movies, and I want to make sure we had someone who this is the person I know that loves this movie more than anything else that has come out from Marvel, and so this is Ian. Ian, can you give us your thoughts on Black Panther? Why do you love it so much?
I love it for a lot of different reasons. I love it because it gave black youth somebody that they could see themselves in. For the longest time, kids have had somebody to look up to, and they looked a lot like them. But for black kids, they didn't really have something like that. Like, you'd have your Saturday morning cartoons, you had your one-off television shows or cartoons that had like a black protagonist as the main character, but it wasn't in the forefront. Like, this is the first time in a very long time that we had it like a very, very prominent character on the big screen in a huge way, and like immediately on social media, like you saw children like dressing up as Black Panther. You saw them wearing African garbs, taking pride in their culture in a way that they never have. So, like, that's one of the things that I love most about that film. It's even motivated me to change my hairstyle twice. I probably wouldn't have dreadlocks today if it wasn't for Killmonger.
I was rewatching. I was like, oh, that's where he got that haircut from.
Absolutely, 100%. So, like, I just think, like, the way that the Black community came together to support this film, like, I haven't seen that amount of camaraderie in my lifetime in the Black community. So, like, it was a beautiful thing that a Marvel movie, a comic book movie, a nerd movie, if you talk to somebody 20 years ago, brought all of that to fruition. So for that reason, like, hands down, Black Panther is my favorite Marvel movie and will go down as one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. And I think that on top of that helps a lot.
Way better than pretty good, but I'll take that. I'll take that.
I think that's really when the little kid at the end looks up. He's literally looking up to Black Panther at the basketball court and is like, "Who are you?" I think that's very sweet. That's a very sweet moment. Cool, Ian. Thank you so much.
Anytime, man. Thanks.
Cool. That was friend of the show, Ian Brooker. I wanted to make sure I got his thoughts embedded in the podcast because he loves this movie more than anything, and I love that he loves this movie. But what did we think about it? Victor, you're a special guest. We'll start with you. What did you think of Black Panther when you saw it, and what does it mean to you today?
I thought it was fantastic. I think the villain Killmonger is the best thing out of that whole movie. His reasoning for why he's doing everything, like, really hit a chord with me. Like, the part in the museum where he's like, no, I'm just going to take that because just like your ancestors stole it from mine. And I'm like, damn, this movie is not holding any punches at all. And I think the subject matter for a movie to be a major Marvel Studios having a Black superhero be the starring role and hit on real Black problems that we have in the real world is, to me, was like, wow, how did they make this movie? And I love the director's work. Like, Creed is still one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Holy cow, okay.
Very cool. Chris, what about you?
So I too love this movie, and I think what it did for Hollywood is incredibly important. Christian's probably tired of hearing me tell this story, but I actually did not enjoy this movie the first time we saw it as much as I do now, solely because of the viewing experience that we had. We were in the
There it is.
We were in the first row of the movie theater, so we had to crane our necks the entire time, and we had two children talking right next to us, literally, for the whole movie. So when I walked out of that movie the first time, I was just, like, kind of grumpy. But every subsequent viewing I've had of this film has gotten better and better and better and better, and I love so much what Ryan Coogler was able to do with this character. I love the way he uses different color motifs to tell the story within the film. Like, I could play the Remember When game right now. Like, everything in Korea seems like it's right out of a James Bond movie. Like, I would watch a Black Panther James Bond movie. I think that would be super dope. Watching him travel around the world, that'd be pretty awesome. Like you said, Victor, Michael B. Jordan does a fantastic job as Killmonger. Andy Serkis also does a great job as Ulysses Klaue. We got to see a little bit of him in Age of Ultron, but I really liked expanding on his character in this film. And I'm actually really sad that he got shot, because I would love to see him more in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The soundtrack,
well, you probably will,
also,
just as like a CGI character,
as a Force ghost.
Yeah.
The soundtrack is also killer. Both the score and was it Drake that wrote a whole bunch of original?
Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
Kendrick Lamar.
Terrible. Rap is not my forte, guys. Let's just say that. But the soundtrack is dope, and I love it.
I do want to hear the Drake Black Panther inspired.
It'll happen.
I'm
It'll
a super sad Panther. Anyway.
Yeah, that would be like a romantic dramedy Black Panther in the club.
Brian.
So I didn't dislike this movie the first time I saw it, but I will say rewatching it this time gave me new appreciation, and even more so, made me realize it's deserving of all the praise that it's getting. You guys have already spoken on the representation The fact that they use an authentic African language with subtitles it seems small, but like in Iron Man 1,
true.
this is something that I didn't mention in the podcast, but the terrorists don't get subtitles, and there's kind of like a dehumanizing element to that, I think. And in this movie, going with like an actual language and having that, I think that was a big step, even outside of the representation in terms of casting. So aside from that, I love the idea of showing how life began on Earth, human life began on Earth in Africa, and framing it in the context of the vibranium meteorite. I know last episode we mentioned panspermia, and this kind of plays into that same idea, some outside force driving life on Earth. Totally game for it. It's right up my alley. Love all of that. This movie has the best emotional moment, in my opinion, or the most affecting for me in the entire MCU. When Killmonger drinks the herb, and we see the scene with him and his father, and his father coming to terms with what his son has become and realizing how he's gone astray. It gets to me. I'm getting emotional just even talking about it, but
He's
I feel
no
like
tears.
no tears, Brian. But it's incredible, and he's such a sympathetic villain. And like you were saying, Victor, he's so representational of this historic abuse, and he sees all this real abuse, and semi-justifiably, he's like, this is the only way we can live. This is the only power that I have to take back, is using their game against them. And so that gets into kind of this interesting like Malcolm X MLK dichotomy that I feel like is kind of going on in this movie: diplomacy versus straight up action in terms of revolution. There's a lot going on here, obviously. Aside from that, something that I thought was interesting, the idea of ritual ceremony in terms of I don't know the word for it, indoctrinating a king, but this idea of like ritual ceremony and something that seems like a plant-based hallucinogenic drug of some sort, and how this is kind of what imbues the leader with knowledge that the rest of the group doesn't have, and in this case, physical powers as well. I just think this movie is working on so many levels and is getting so much across, and I will save it for a little later once we get to our final opinions of this, because I don't know if I totally agree with some of the underlying messaging that's getting across here, but all in all, amazing movie. The set design, I think the waterfalls here, Wakanda feels so real and lived in. There are times when it's not completely incredible, but I love the visuals and the costuming. Costuming is top notch, just all the different tribes and the warrior class. It's incredible. Love it.
Dude, I love that you mentioned the scene with Eric Killmonger and his father, because what Ryan Coogler did by just juxtaposing what T'Challa sees when he goes into the afterlife versus what Eric Killmonger sees. Like, T'Challa has this like rich cultural heritage that he's grown up with, but all Eric Killmonger knows is Oakland, you know? So like his afterlife, or his vision is just going back into his childhood apartment and having one more conversation with his father. I thought that juxtaposition was really cool. Also, stupid little side like world building note that I forgot to mention. You know, I've been doing this the entire month. We've been talking about these movies. I love there's a scene in Korea where we first get to see T'Challa put on the Black Panther outfit, and he jumps on top of the car, and I think he's really frustrated with Shuri or something, and he says, for the love of Boss, Shuri, or something like that. So like they even have their own cultural gods. Like Boss in the Marvel universe is like the Panther god, basically. So instead of saying like for the love of God or Jesus Christ, like it just deepens the culture that they're creating in Wakanda. I thought that was really cool.
See, totally agree. Piggybacking off that, M'Baku references Hanuman, which is a Hindu god as well. And I was just like, oh yes, just little things like that. It just makes me happy.
So Black Panther is, I think, a really great movie, and I think it's not a super great superhero movie. Rewatching it, you know, when we originally watched it, Chris, you're very right in the fact that the first viewing it was just prone for me to not have a great time, and because we were really close and it was very crowded, there was a lot of distractions, and also I think the superhero spectacle of it is really where this movie falls short. But I do want to talk about the strengths of this movie. All the things you guys have said, I think the cast is absolutely phenomenal. I think Chadwick Boseman is doing a pretty good job. I like his arc and his character a little more in Civil War. and I think he has a little bit more emotion and range to go to. But watching it, this is my third time watching it. I really did enjoy him coming to terms, and actually think he does a good thing of actually finding peace and solace in what Michael B. Jordan's mission was, and kind of him seeing that with his girlfriend, kind of seeing where his deficiencies lie and where he should take the country. And I do love the idea of his father telling him it's hard for a good man to be king. I really love that line a lot. I love, obviously, Michael B. Jordan can't get enough love here. One of the strongest Marvel villains. Lupita Nyong'o's always killing it, as per usual. We get a little bit of Jordan Peele crossover. We got Lupita Nyong from Us, and we also have Daniel Kaluuya with, I wish he had more to do, because he's an insanely good actor, and he kind of has this one-note turn that's not super interesting, but I still think he's doing a great job. And, of course, Andy Serkis. And who's Letitia Wright, the little girl who plays Shuri?
She plays Shuri. Mm-hmm.
She is so fun, and you like when she's on screen, she's just so energetic, and I think her performance really shines in this movie. And she's super fun, being a really smart, young Q type character, kind of fitting into that James Bond realm.
Dude, that's exactly what I thought.
Yes. I told you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think all that works really well. So I want to state that, and I think messaging wise, this is the boldest message that a Marvel movie has ever had, and gives you a lot to chew on and a lot to think about, and a really great way to serve up something very entertaining, but also with a really important message about how the nature versus nurture argument we're having about how just this environmental impacts that can affect you growing up can change your perception. And how you behave towards that perception, right? And it may not always be, it may be justified, but it may be cruel and hurt others along the way. So I think that's super important. To what I said when I started off, I think the Korea scene is probably the strongest action set piece for me. But other than that,
I would say that.
I'm hoping that in the sequels we get for Black Panther, Ryan Coogler is better able to direct action with the CGI team, the Industrial Light and Sound team. I just don't think that communication was really good. It seems like they didn't have a ton of budget. And I don't know if we're ever going to get this, but it really frustrates me that Black Panther is CGI'd. And so was Killmonger once he was in a Black Panther suit. It just looks silly. I'm really not a fan of he gets a new Black Panther outfit that puts the mask on his face. And I find that so dumb, because literally every character in the MCU now has an automatic mask face. Like every character, so you then took away his physical helmet and any reason to actually shoot him in the suit. And it's just distracting. And the last fight scene between Killmonger and that whole set piece, I don't think is particularly inspired, and kind of a sour note to end what I think a really great movie. Just the spectacle falls completely.
That did sour me. That went under that Marvel trope of supervillain is the same as hero, and they just have a CGI fight that every superhero movie does. Like Iron Man 1, I rewatched it again with my wife, and it was like, oh man, they did just do that. Like big robot fights small robot, and it just you get bored.
Yeah, you had an opportunity
it's done too much.
The most emotional best action set pieces are like the one on the waterfall.
Yeah,
is incredible, and it didn't have to be like a big things blowing up and exploding. It's like the Martin Freeman character, him like doing a chase, and all this stuff it's just unnecessary, and it doesn't actually get us involved with the characters as much as we should. And juxtaposed to what we'll be talking about with Infinity War, where there's so much emotion in all those action set pieces, and it's a very different movie, and it is very large scale, but I think the Russos always remember to keep it close to the heart and make it fun, but make it feel very physical. And I just think the movie is kind of failing at that in almost every action set piece. So I prefer that, though, and I don't want to... It's weird when you're critical of something that means so much to someone. I don't want to put that down. People who love this movie and enjoy it, I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm really hoping that we get the same kind of emotional, hard-hitting weight, a good, a message that makes you think a great villain, and maybe the action just gets a little bit better. But it's really the spectacle of it that kind of fails for me at the end of the day. But still a great Marvel movie, for sure.
Absolutely.
So just one other Jordan Peele connection. Tim Heidecker is also... as a cameo in this movie. He's the tour guide on the boat.
No, that's Ant-Man.
No, that's the next one we're going to be talking about.
Jumping ahead.
But I mean, Winston Duke was also in Us. I don't think you mentioned that.
I didn't. I didn't even realize he plays
M'Baku.
Yeah. M'Baku's great. I love that moment where Martin Freeman's character starts talking to him. He starts barking at him. I love that everybody calls him colonizer. It's really good.
Vegetarian. The vegetarian joke is really funny. M'Baku doesn't get a lot in this movie, but at least the second time we see him, he at least has a couple of jokes.
I think he's doing fantastic. I really love him
I
as a
agree.
supporting character. Yeah, he's doing great. I'm so sorry I didn't mention him. I feel like I'm at a loss. He embodies such a different character than he is in Us. That I didn't even recognize
totally
it.
different.
Very cool. Any final thoughts on Black Panther, guys?
So I had just briefly mentioned something, just one, not necessarily a nitpick, but something that I hope they build on and go beyond my expectations. But just the way this movie ends with kind of T'Challa just essentially building a community outreach center.
Oh, it's so great. I love it.
Oh yeah.
See, is it okay? All right. It feels a little. It feels a little bit like pick your own community up, like pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like Africa is going to come to America, and I don't know. There was something about it that
he learns a lesson though, because Killmonger's whole message is: you have all this resources, you have all of this able to do it, and you let the rest of the world fall. Like, and that's like they have the chance to give everyone the same start, and they're holding it in. Yeah. So that's where I don't know. That's where I like that part. Because it's saying that it's kind of a message also not by race, but I think by also to the wealthy. Like, that's why I love this movie. I think it takes jabs at that. Like, you take all of this in, but you're not giving any of it. And you have this great start. Like, T'Challa didn't make an empire or build a new app. He inherited all this wealth. Right. And what is he going to do different from other kings? He's going to share it and help make the world better.
And and this time around, that was something the first time I felt weird about it, and watching it this time, the fact that he shows the children this crazy spaceship, essentially, and brings it down, makes me think that there's going to be some, like, technology that he's bringing to the community as well that will, like, on a larger scale.
Because that's like what I don't like about the scene. I love the idea and the messaging, and like I mentioned in my conversation with Ian, I love that it literally ends with a little black kid looking up at Black Panther, like literally looking up at him, and I think that is great imagery, and I think it's a beautiful way to end the film. I don't like, if you're like a billionaire and you're going to a community, the first thing that I think would be very disrespectful to do is like show up in a Maserati and be like, yeah, look at my Maserati.
I thought about that too with the spaceship.
That's what, he literally calls it a space Bugatti, like one of the kids play basketball. Yeah. I think that's a little silly, but you know, it is what it is. It's a superhero movie at the end of the day, and why don't we end it with people getting excited about spaceships? But overall, a solid movie. And I think probably, definitely one of the best in the group of movies that we'll be talking about as we move on. And the next movie to come out was Infinity War. We'll talk about that later. But following Infinity War, we get Ant-Man. We're like, hey, this is the first in the Marvel movies that we're like, wait a second, they have to be doing some weird stuff with time, which we might see in the following movies as well. Lets us know that Marvel's like, no, we can just make stuff in between the movies that come out after, and people will get it. And I think it's putting a lot of trust in the audience. And that movie is Ant-Man and the Wasp.
So, how long have you been Ant-Man again?
Not long. It just sort of happened.
I wish I could fight bad guys like you.
I seem to mess it up almost every time.
Maybe you just need someone watching your back. Hi. Like a partner.
Dr. Pym, I actually heard what happened to you. You opened up the quantum realm. That's when this crazy creepy ghost who like walks through walls and stuff. Stole your tech.
Why are you already laughing?
I'm laughing because of the little things that you're saying about it is making me laugh. Like,
tiny little jabs.
What? I think it's,
I can sense your like frustration with it not giving you answers.
No, yeah. I mean, it is frustrating as a viewer, but I think more frustrating is the fact this movie sucks ass. It's like, it's I digress, guys. What do you think of Ant-Man and the Wasp?
So, last week I may have given a little teaser into my opinion of this film. When Christian and I first saw it, I was actually pretty positive on this film. I think I still gave it a C, but I enjoyed watching it. I've made a 180 on this movie, guys. Let me start by talking about the things that I like. about this movie. I think that's a good idea. I really like that we get to see Marvel's de-aging technology again with Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer at the beginning of the movie. They constantly prove that they are getting better and better and better at making older actors look young without it breaking the uncanny valley, right? So I think they did a great job there. I really enjoy Randall Park's character. That might be not the opinion of everybody while watching this movie, but I love Randall Park in general. The actor that plays Jimmy Woo, the FBI agent.
So good.
Randall Park is great in everything that I've seen him in. He's so funny. I love the way they play with size in this movie. I think that's super important for an Ant-Man movie. With a hero that shrinks and grows, it's important that scale becomes part of the film. And once again, just like with the first Ant-Man movie, they do it really well. Luis, Michael Pena, just like we said with Ant-Man. So again, a standout for this movie. The last positive thing I have about this film is I really like the scene where Paul Rudd has to imitate Michelle Pfeiffer. I think he does a really good job in that scene, connecting with both Michael Douglas and Evangeline Lilly, making it seem like Michelle Pfeiffer really is like embodying him. Okay, so now that the positive stuff is out of the way, this is a messy movie.
It's
guys.
very messy.
Like, there's a lot of fat in this film that I think could be cut, right? To me, this movie feels like this is the first time in 20-odd movies where a film in the MCU actually feels like an episode of television. Like, it doesn't really feel like its own movie, but it just feels like an episode of a television show that we need so we can get some crucial details about the next episode of the television show, which would be Endgame. There's an important piece in this film, which is the quantum realm and time travel, which I think is going to play a huge role in how our heroes defeat Thanos in Endgame. So they needed to get that piece of exposition out to make sure it made sense in Endgame. I don't think Ghost is a particularly strong character in this film. I think they either needed to cut Ghost or cut Walton Goggins from this movie.
Oh, you're crazy.
I love hear me out. I love Walton Goggins. Okay, I love his character. He's one of the funnier parts of the film. But I think they had to cut one of them. And the reason I say Walton Goggins is because I think Ghost's story arc is crucial to the quantum realm stuff. Walton Goggins really doesn't have any, like, he's mostly there as like a deterrent for our heroes. Like, he's not really tied to any of the quantum realm stuff, which is necessary for Endgame. So like, as much as it pains me to say that, because I love him in this movie and think he's more interesting than Ghost, I think he would be the character that they would have to cut. At one point, I wrote in my notes, this movie is just a bunch of people getting in each other's way until they realize that they're working toward the same thing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I would still give this movie like a C, like middle of the road
For
C.
Conkling approves.
But instead of being a positive C, like when I first saw it with Christian, it's more of like this is not the one I'm going to go back to all the time.
Yeah, we talked about how we left the movie, and we talked about it, and I just shat on it, and then you said the things you liked, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty much a C-D movie, and you're like, yeah, like a C, and I was like, we didn't see this. Like, we had the same rating, but I was an asshole about it, which I'm gonna be. I'm gonna tear this movie a new one, Iron Man 3 style, but before I do that, Victor, I want to hear your thoughts.
It's okay. Like, I guess I like watched this, I laughed and I walked away. The end credit scene was like, okay, cool, you did that. I love the dynamic between him and his daughter, and Paul Rudd's
so good.
Yeah, that whole thing is really great. I do that scene where he is Michelle Pfeiffer is amazing. I was like, oh wow, he can really act. Okay, like, he's always kind of played the dumb stoner friend guy, and like, I think that's, you got to see him like flex that. But as a story, yeah, I would agree with you guys there. I'm not defending the story in any way. I was just looking for something to laugh at. Walton Goggins is my favorite because I love all this movie does is build world, basically, like extra crap in Marvel, and I kind of like the idea of a guy that's just trying to make money, and it brings out. I do think they should cut out ghosts, but I thought that was kind of like that's what made it feel like an episode of S.H.I.E.L.D. to me, was the ghost storyline, honestly. But I laughed,
perfect.
and then I just kind of like, ugh.
Calling it an episode of Agents.
I laughed and then, ugh.
Calling it an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's a perfect. That's what it is. That's what it kind of is.
I laughed and I walked away and I didn't think about it again. That's what it was. Like, it was just like a breather from what happened in Infinity War. It wasn't as heavy as everything else. Like, this movie out of the 4 that we're reviewing is like the lightest, and that's why it's easy to tear it apart. But it's also just like, it is. I do agree with that. I will say my last thing. Stan Lee's cameo in it is one of my favorites, though.
It is really funny.
It is slapstick.
You mentioned the end credits scene. Another thing I was thinking about when watching this movie was, how could Marvel Studios have taken that end credit scene and made it make sense without us having to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp? Like, how could we still get that information that, like, those 3 characters were dusted without having to sit through the rest of the movie? And I couldn't figure it out, sadly, but that was one thing I thought about. And Brian, what do you think about this movie?
So, I feel like I generally agree with the criticisms you guys are making. The way you put it, Victor, it's just like a palate cleanser after Endgame, and I appreciate it for that, because I think this is almost like a straight comedy. There's there are consequences, and there's stuff that's happening drama wise, but it's such a straight comedy, and that's what I'm in it for. A lot of the I actually like a lot of the visual gags. I've said it before. Having watched the trailer, I feel like a lot of the best ones were given away, which is kind of unfortunate. Obviously, it's different on the big screen, but the action is not really what I was in this movie for. Scott's relationship with his daughter Cassie, I think, is definitely a high point. Introduced to them in the beginning, seeing them going around the fort that he's created for, super heartwarming. It really brings a lot to his character, I think, as a father. Something I think this movie did well was the way it introduces Wasp's or Hope's backstory in the very beginning, with that voiceover from Hank and showing us her past. I thought that was like quick, like 3-4 minutes, gave us all the backstory we need, and then from the previous movie as well, and we just hop right in. I thought it didn't waste any time with it and got us right into the story. Aside from that, conceptually, I love the quantum realm stuff. I just texted you guys that the thing they bring up to explain the quantum connection between Scott and I'm gonna blank on her name.
Janet Van
Michelle
Dyne.
Pfeiffer. Yep, Janet's character. They say the quantum connection between the Posner molecules in their brain, which I was looking up what this was, and it's actually a real it's a real particle that's theorized to explain potential quantum activity in the brain, and this is like cutting edge, modern, theoretical brain science. So,
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, super cool. And I think that's something that we've talked about in the past with the Thor movies. They explain wormholes as Einstein-Rosen bridges and are very much like using science that exists and then taking it a step further to be able to make it functional. But I love that kind of thing, just building this universe that can be scientifically grounded and still fantastic. So I like
Brian,
it for that. Mm-hmm.
Talking about the quantum entanglement and like Posner molecules in the brain and stuff. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, like those of us that like live with somebody for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to read the article before we started recording. But like quantum entanglement is something they talk about between like spouses or like significant others. I don't know if you've experienced this, but my wife will like incept ideas into my head, and I'll incept ideas into hers without us even talking to each other. And then one of us will like end up saying something out loud, and the other person will be like, oh my God, I was just thinking about that. So like spending time with somebody, they say it can even sometimes happen with like pets, where like you're just quantum entangled, or you experience this quantum entanglement with that person from cohabitating with them for so long. Did they mention that at all in the article, Brian?
So they didn't mention that exactly, but what's really interesting about this is that it can be tested. So this is kind of like they know that entanglement exists, and they don't know if the brain works on a quantum level at this point. A lot of people have hypothesized about it in the past, and some of that stuff has been there was like a thing about microtubules that they were looking into like in the 90s that ended up not being accurate. But that's what makes this really interesting, is that we still have a lot to learn about the brain in terms of whether it's actually working on the quantum level. And there was an interesting there was some study that they brought up to justify it that I'm not going to be able to remember well now, but it had something to do with testing lithium on rats, and it showed that a different type of lithium, that the only difference was its quantum state because of the amount of molecules in the nucleus? Something in the nucleus. I'm butchering the science here, but it basically showed them that potentially this different quantum state changed the results and the effects of this lithium on rats, and they're trying to replicate that now and eventually, move to humans to test out this type of stuff. But yeah, I'm all for it.
This movie covers a lot of that and gives us a lot to think about.
I could feel Christian's rage just festering.
Sorry for that digression, guys.
No, that's totally cool. It would have been really cool if this movie had anything to do with any of that, but it doesn't.
I mean,
I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you for saying all this, and I'm glad that it made you interested in looking into quantum stuff. I think the movie can be best summed up in its science by Paul Rudd's line, which is like, "Do you guys just put the word quantum in front of everything?"
Yeah.
It's true.
It's great. It's great. So I blew the lead with the Tim Heidecker cameo here because I watch too many movies right before we record and then get things mixed up. But the Luis and the Truth Serum bit. That gag, I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so freaking funny. I love the way they bring back him retelling the stories and the actors acting them out. Like, I could watch that all day. So the comedy here is what's working best for sure. That one line about quantum stuff doesn't justify the rest of it necessarily.
So when we talked about Ant-Man, I had said, even though Edgar Wright never inevitably directed that movie, it still felt like an Edgar Wright movie. His touch was felt throughout, and it felt like one solid piece of cohesive entertainment. This movie feels like it was written by 5 different people because it was written by 5 different people, and it feels like they're having an argument the entire time. The comedy works in bursts, and you know what? I enjoyed it the second time through a lot more because I didn't really watch it. I was doing a lot of other stuff and had it on, and occasionally during the Truth Serum part, or I love the gag where he's like half small, half big.
Yeah,
I wish it played more into it.
In the elementary school?
That's super funny. And Paul Rudd's just entertaining and awesome. I do really love Randall Park, and I think that stuff's working. But this movie is such a damn mess. Just like you said, it's like the plot of this movie is just people getting away and then finding out they're on the same team. This movie makes no sense as far as like the science of it is pretty thin. They have this really great. I talk about the opportunity of movies to do stuff, and what disappoints me about Marvel movies sometimes. And this really, I knew this was going to have to do with the quantum realm. They were set up to do it, and we spend maybe 5 minutes on screen time in the quantum realm, which seems like a really interesting place to be because it's essentially the tiny universes around us, and it's such a cool idea. But this movie wastes it and makes no sense with place and time with what it is, or you could build a whole civilization within the quantum realm. They don't bother to do any of that. No, they stick Hope's mother in. She got powers that they don't explain and comes back and fixes everything with no explanation of why that is or what she got from it. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating filmmaking. Characters' motivations are silly. This simple fact that if you made a building smaller and you carried it around like a suitcase, that everything in that building would fly everywhere and everything would be fucking broken. So stupid. So dumb.
I think that Hank Pym was smart enough to nail everything to the floor, thus preventing everything from flying around.
No, I looked. Nope, I looked.
You looked.
No, there's lots of loose shit everywhere. Because I thought, what, maybe they did do that. Maybe I'm not being. And then I saw the lab, and I'm like, no, there's keyboards and chairs, and it's not set up to move around too much. There's a scene in which Michael Pena's character goes really small in his little race car and then does nothing with it and then gets bigger. Like, there's no reason for things happening. Tim Heidecker's completely wasted because he's an amazing comedic force, tour de force, and he just says, like, look at the ocean, and then it's whatever. The final climactic scene of him going big to grab Walter Goggins is stupid. I'm going to stop. This isn't like... I want to say it's almost as broken as Iron Man 3. I think it's a little more consequential, but it's one of those things where it's conflicting with itself in tones. And I do think overall it works okay as a comedy, but it really shits the bed on a lot of opportunities to do cool things. And it can still be fun. Like, I'm not saying the movie has to be like Endgame, Civil War serious. Like, although that I do prefer that. You know, I enjoyed Ant-Man a lot. I enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, and those are pretty lighthearted movies. This movie can be lighthearted. It's just that he's going in too many different directions. And the scene, it's got broken scenes. Like when they get captured by Ghost and Lawrence Fishburne's character, it's like that scene doesn't make any sense, and it's stupid and not staged well. It's like
that the giant ants save them.
Yeah, it's just it's like so many Deus Machinas out of nowhere. Hope's story, or we finally get a female. It's called Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's not really about them doing anything together. So it's a stupid name. The name sucks for what the movie is, right? And Hope's character doesn't really grow or change in any way. Paul Rudd's Ant-Man's relationship with Hope doesn't evolve in any meaningful way. Like, this movie is just a waste of time.
Maybe the Ant-Man and the Wasp that they're talking about isn't Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, but instead Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne.
Cool.
Maybe
then
they're the
yeah. Well, if you don't need to go on this, listen. Two things that you could have done. You could have you got this de-aging technology. You got Michelle Pfeiffer. She's hot as shit. You know, do a movie with them and set it back in the '60s. Like, that'd be cool. Like, I would love that. I'm totally down for that.
Awesome.
Or if it was, you know, my idea was like for the Quantum Realm, make it like an inner space adventure into the unknown world, Osmosis Jones style, like. Crazy visuals, like you can do that. Instead, we get 5 different directions and not a whole lot.
I'm sure they're saving that type of stuff for like the inevitable Fantastic Four movie that they're going to make.
I'm going to go ahead and say that if they did that movie, Christian, that you would shit all over the CG and call it trash.
No, because I like a lot of the ideas they're going for in the Quantum Realm, and it's different when you're on a spaceship or you're on a desert planet. You know, I don't get mad if. You have to CGI shit that doesn't exist. In the Quantum Realm, just those type of visuals, they don't exist. So if you're not comparing anything, if I see a CGI helicopter, I compare it to a real helicopter I've seen. Whereas if you CGI a floating molecular worm beast, it's like I have nothing to compare that to. So of course it's CGI, but my imagination isn't conflicted with what that actually looks like. So no, I would not. So
that actually is a real animal, though. It's like a microscopic animal. You should definitely look it up.
No, I believe that it's a real animal. I just have never seen one the size of a boat, so I don't. So that's
you haven't. I have.
We could do a whole podcast on CGI. Obviously, I come across as the expert, but I have no experience in animation or lighting or graphic arts, so I'm probably a really bad person to always be critical of it. But I did go to school for film, so I can't say something about filmmaking. And I don't think it's when it's things that don't exist in the world, then I think it's a lot easier. And I really do like what they did, what little they did in the Quantum Realm.
I'm sure we're going to see more of it in Endgame.
But it feels already ruined. It feels tainted.
Don't let it be ruined.
I don't think they might build up on it more than what you're saying. I think they'll dive into it because in certain comics, the Quantum Realm holds like a prison for like super villains at one point. So they might do stuff with that. But it's always kind of like the Phantom Zone in the comics. It's just big and red. There's nothing really fancy about it, from what I remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll find out if I'll shit on it if they go quantum for stuff. But I liked what little they did. But most of these movies sucks ass for every other reason.
Boom.
That's fair.
Done. That's hotter than pancakes right there. Cool. Let's move on and never talk about this movie again. So we get I would say, a more competently made film. It's been 23 movies or whatever in the MCU, and we haven't had a female-led superhero yet. I believe that's disgraceful. I think Marvel really dropped the ball. There's plenty of female characters to pick from, and so we finally get it in 2019. This was the last film released in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. sans Endgame, which premiered tonight and is coming out tomorrow if you're listening. But this is still in theaters, I believe, and making gangbusters, and that is Captain Marvel.
So, Skrulls are the bad guys. And you're a Kree, a race of noble warriors.
Heroes. Noble warrior heroes.
Your life began the day it nearly ended. We found you. With no memory, we made you one of us. So you could live longer, stronger, superior. You were reborn.
I keep having these memories. Something in my past is the key
So
to
Captain
all of
Marvel,
this.
the first female-led superhero movie. What do we think about it? Brian, as our resident feminist, I would like for you to...
Is that what I am?
I don't know. I'm just poking fun. We're all
The other
feminists.
guys hate
we're all
women podcast.
We are all pro women and women's success on this podcast.
Agreed.
But
But we're not all pro Captain Marvel, which we will come to see. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I don't
of this
think
movie.
any of us are.
Oh no, Brian.
So all right, here.
Started out
one
posies.
feminist here, apparently. The guy, I'm the representative for women again. I don't, no, but yeah, I'm a fan of this movie. I saw it twice in theaters, and world building wise, conceptually, I may have said it before on the podcast. I think comics are one of, if not the most subversive medium in a lot of ways in terms of concepts that are injected, and this movie does not disappoint in that regard. So we've got the supreme AI intelligence, which I brought it up a bit last episode, and leading up to Infinity War, I'll get into it more explicitly. But doing this inversion of things, so you have this. There's this idea that the AI, you see whoever you most. I'm losing the phrase here. Whoever you most respect.
Yeah.
Respect.
Right. So it's this
idolize,
idea
yeah.
of this consciousness that presents itself to you, however you need it to be viewed. And it's such a spiritual idea, I think, in terms of angels and demons and God and the what that would actually look like and how potentially subjective it would be. So I love that whole idea conceptually, and the Kree being this future civilization. I think AI is very prescient to talk about that today. Aside from this, you have the Skrulls, which are literally alien shapeshifters who are presented as coming down to the Earth to infiltrate, which is like the furthest ends of conspiracy theory madness in the modern age. But in comics, this is just business as usual. So I loved how they took that, which is this idea of like paranoid fear, and turned it into a refugee situation. I thought that was brilliant to flip that on its head and show, like, we think these things are different, but really they're just as maybe not human, but very much conscious and real beings that can be humanized as well. So I appreciate it on that level. One of my favorite scenes that is something that I hadn't seen before. The Skrulls are looking into her memory. Yeah, looking into Captain Marvel's memory and directing her memory almost. So it's like she's got this data in her head, and they're able to force her to focus on particular objects and go back into her memory and pinpoint things that she wasn't consciously aware of. That idea of the way we store data in our brains and how we could potentially go back and get to it, totally interesting to me. And I like Captain Marvel, and world building wise, I'm excited in terms of her character being utilized maybe a little more with a different arc, maybe in Endgame. I know Christian and I had talked about this previously, how there's not as much character building potentially as would be possible because of her having lost her memory and all of this. But I'm a fan of this movie. I'm going to stop rambling on about it. But what do you guys think?
Great.
Victor.
I'm gonna say my positives first. I didn't hate this movie. I think I wanted too much from it. So like I think the same feeling you guys have with Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like Ant-Man and the Wasp, I had zero expectation. This one, I wanted it to say something as much as as Black Panther did, and that's why I think I left a little disappointed. The positives, I will say, the Stan Lee cameo in this with him reading the lines from Mallrats and the reaction it got out of Kevin Smith, heartbreaking. Like, that's amazing. Because on the subway, he's reading lines from Mallrats, and it's awesome because it's set in the 90s. The fact that they've, I think, nailed a Superman type and it's a woman this time is great. Like, they gave, like, at the end where she finally realizes who she is, I wish we saw more of that in this movie. I wish we, like, hit that nail on the head of, like, this whole movie is little hints of, like, men telling her she can't do things. And I kind of really wish the Supreme Intelligence was, like, a male figure in her life, that she, like, constantly didn't do things or was or some type of thing and remembers that she rebelled against it and became a pilot. Like, it wanted to say something, but I felt like it just kind of drew the line a little bit too much, and it held
just
back.
A little, it's like muddled because he's telling her to like control her emotions, which is somehow like a bad thing of someone like holding someone like it's. I guess women see it as something they are always told because they're not as logical as men can be, I guess. So I see where that goes, but like I feel like every story of like a young hero is like you need to learn how to control your emotions. Mentors always say, right? Am I missing something?
And there's a great thing I learned from my wife because I never realized this. So we both worked for the same place for a long time, and one of her female coworkers like, "Can you read this? Does this sound too bitchy?" And every guy in the room was like, "Just send it." And she was like, "No, I have to reread it because it's coming from a woman. It can come off as way too opinionated instead of actual like facts and feedback to give to somebody." And I never thought about that. This movie, that's why I kind of wish it hit that. Like, women are getting their first really big superhero, and to Christian's point, it took way too long to get there. There's tons in the Marvel universe. But I think them going with Captain Marvel is smart though, because she is there, as I said earlier, like their Superman figure in the universe other than Sentry. I don't know if they ever bring him into the play, but the end scene where she's like knows what she's doing at the end, knocks people out, isn't like unsure of herself, is great. And I hope we see that in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
But other than that, the movie is just kind of it's like Samuel L. Jackson playing with a cat. It's funny, but I was just like, half of the movie I wish they just kind of cut out a little bit.
For sure. Fair. You guys are going to correct me on... I wasn't saying that all women are too emotional. I was just saying that that's why she was... I was having trouble as a goer, and probably as a male, understanding why that was like bad advice to be less emotional in combat, you know? Because it seems like most people get that message, men alike, in training scenes and stuff. So I guess it just didn't hit me that hard, because it seems like something you would tell anybody when you're like teaching them how to fight.
Oh yeah,
right.
So I guess that's why it wasn't working for me. Anyway, Chris.
So I mean, I agree with everything that you guys have already said. As far as like the female empowerment aspect of this film, I think it's difficult for us to judge how impactful it actually was. I definitely think is only because we're men. Most of the women that I've talked to that have seen this film have said that they really, really liked it, and they could feel the empowerment aspects that this film was trying to present to the audience. I do think it could have been a little bit cleaner. I think with the relationship between Jude Law and Brie Larson, they're definitely trying to present that, right? Like Christian said, you have this character who's trying to control Carol Danvers the entire time, trying to make sure she suppresses her powers, and then finally we get that scene in the end where she just like blasts him full strength and says, "I don't have to prove anything to you." So that I did feel that is like the culmination of her character arc in this film. I actually really enjoyed watching this film. I saw it 4 times, which is a lot. Wow. I think what really draws me to this movie, to be honest, is the 90s nostalgia. Like, as someone who grew up in the 90s, like, I'm really digging on the 90s vibe. The soundtrack is really good. I love that they pulled mostly female artists from the 90s. I think that's a cool idea. The only song that kind of pulled me out of the movie was toward the end of the movie when Carol Danvers is blasting Star Force on the Kree ship, and it starts playing No Doubt Just a Girl. Like,
oh, really? That's my favorite
if
part.
you couldn't beat us over the head with the fact that she's a female superhero, this is where the female empowerment is just like a little. I'm like, you don't have to do this. This is
to be honest. The first time I saw it, it took me right out of the movie. With subsequent viewings, it got easier and easier to digest. But another weird aspect of this moment is that every other song in the film is diegetic, which means that the characters in the film are actually hearing the music that's being played. This is the only song in the film that is non-diegetic.
No, it's diegetic. Means, it was playing out of her vagina.
It's not. It's not. It's non-diegetic.
I didn't realize. I thought she punches someone into a jukebox. You're right.
There is a jukebox, but the jukebox is not playing the song because the song doesn't stop when the jukebox gets blasted. Every other song in the film is actually playing within the world of the film. But that's another thing, and that's more of like a production aspect of the film that pulled me out of it. That was
Chris, my counterpoint is the Kree chip on her neck. When it breaks, it plays that song.
It plays, no doubt.
To give that is the sound of her superpowers coming back.
Yeah, but I mean, that got, like I said, it got easier to digest the more times I watched it. I really, really, really like what they did with the Skrulls, and I think Ben Mendelsohn did a fantastic job playing Talos. Like, he's one of the quirkiest MCU characters I think we've seen. And the way he's kind of like acclimated himself to Earth culture is really fun to watch. The fact that the Skrull, obviously spoiler alert, are actually good in this film is a huge twist, because the Skrull in comics are typically depicted as a villainous or very aggressive warrior race. So I really like that they did that, because it deepens the Skrull culture within the MCU, and also potentially gives us the ability to still see evil Skrulls in the future, right? Because, I mean, all cultures are diverse. You have good people, you have bad people, and it's no different for an alien species like the Skrull. I think that's really cool.
I don't like the Skrulls. They need to get off our planet. Stop taking all our jobs. Just kidding.
As far as like the Jesus, the de-aging looks great in this again. Sam Jackson looks like he was plucked right out of the 90s, like time vortex to the 2019 to be in this movie. But yeah, I had fun with it. I don't know if you guys caught this. I think I mentioned it to Christian, but like a little world building tidbit for this film: the Pegasus base in the movie is the base that gets destroyed at the beginning of Avengers.
What?
Did you guys realize that?
Yes, it is the NASA site. It's a real life NASA site. Yeah, it's a cool
I thought
set.
that was cool.
That's where he has a Tesseract and everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed the world building stuff. Christian, what do you think about this movie?
I want to start off by saying this movie is nowhere as big of a mess as Ant-Man and the Wasp. This film is very entertaining. It's competently made. I would say I'm not like a super fan of it, and I want to be very clear that I have nothing against a movie that is for female empowerment. I think that's a wonderful message. It's just like, and obviously it's not going to resonate as much with me. And Brie Larson has already shared that she doesn't give a shit what I think about the movie, based on my demographic. But I think Brie Larson is great. I just don't think she's really engaging and confident, and I like that they just set her up right from the get-go. She's just a very capable person. I would have liked to see her struggle a little bit more. I feel like there's not a lot of struggling with her as a character, not a lot of times when she's being tested as much as I would like to see any main antagonist be tested. It just made it a little boring. And I think they were afraid to make her look weak, and you can't be. You got to show vulnerability with your main characters, with the people that we're supposed to grow in love with. We need to see those, and I feel like the movie didn't have the balls to do it. Stupid. I didn't mean it that way.
Here we are, folks.
I didn't mean it that way. Well, no, this film was co-directed by a man and a woman, so there's a lot of balance going into the creation of this.
Yeah, Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck.
Yeah, and I think the movie kind of goes like this. I'll enjoy a little bit of it. Some things are less effective, and it kind of goes like that for the entire film. I think there's a couple really engaging scenes. I love when she finally becomes Captain Marvel. I think all that's really cool. And I think that's the moment where I'm not really bothered that she's not facing a challenge because she's going full Super Saiyan. I really love the flashback of her in the jet running the test mission. Once we get that full flashback, it's really visceral. It was really exciting to see in the theater, and I think that's working. I don't like all the music because it's too it's like trying to do Guardians style, but for 90s music, and maybe it's
and
just
not committing to it.
Yeah, and it's also that I don't think 90s music. I love 90s music, and it's not that I hate it. I mean, this had what I love that Nirvana song they use. It's like the only male one that they use, the "Come As You Are," but it does not fit in this movie. Number one, it's a male artist, and number two, it has nothing to do. I guess that scene sucks. It makes me very frustrated, but I just think the music's not working for me personally, and so this movie has a lot of things I really like. I love him and Sam Jackson, or excuse me, her and Sam Jackson. Look at me, just showing my want for it to be a male-oriented film. I love Brie Larson and Sam. I think they got great chemistry together. I love Ben Mendelsohn's character so much. I wish her friend. Let me pull the character name real quick.
Monica Rambeau. Oh no, it's Maria Rambeau.
Maria Rambeau.
Oh yeah, the scenes with them are the best. With the two of them talking about everything and how like she helped her through all that.
Yeah,
like that. I wish they showed more of.
Yeah, I was super interested in that, and that seemed like where there's a lot of heart, and so I wish we got more of that. As far as the cinematography of the movie, yeah, I've expressed my frustrations with some of the CGI world building and for the Kree civilization in the beginning. I would say I'll watch it again and maybe have a different opinion. Sometimes when you watch it on video at home, it's a little different than in the theater. Some of the CGI can look rougher on the big screen if it's not like, So I will say that maybe that's better. I'm not going to have a yes or no, but I do like the cinematography once we're actually on Earth. But I think there's some lazy stuff. Like there's a really good scene in the house right before the main conflict with Ben Mendelsohn's character and Brie Larson and everything, and it's shot like a TV show, and it frustrates me. It's like very single camera, this person on. It just seems lazy, so that kind of was frustrating, where I thought there could be a little bit more artistic merit going into that. But other than that, I give it a solid a thumbs up. I liked it, but there's just a couple things that bothered me where I thought it could be a little better. But that's where I come in this one. This one's right down the middle. This is my standard. This is exactly where I think most Marvel movies land as far as my enjoyment, artistic merit, and fun popcorn films, kind of that encompassing thing. I think this is just right in the middle.
I think this is going to be one of those movies that we've talked about that gets better retroactively. Once we know where Captain Marvel goes down the line,
maybe
we might have more of an attachment, and this movie might get stronger. Christian, I know when we walked out of the theater, you were like, I'm really excited to see what the Russo brothers are able to do with Captain Marvel and her character and how they direct her.
Yeah, because she's a cool character, got a great actress,
And just some behind-the-scenes information, Brie Larson actually shot everything for Endgame prior to shooting Captain Marvel.
Wow.
Because Captain Marvel takes place in the past. And so she would have undoubtedly done her scenes in Endgame in the before, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I too am interested to see. I'm just gonna skip.
There
right
was
over
a
that.
joke there that I don't even know where I was going with it, but something about time travel.
Yeah. My point is I'm interested to see what the Russo brothers are able to do with direction and her character, but I'm also interested to see what she's like in Endgame, since it seems like, considering she shot that first, by the time she shot Captain Marvel, she should have kind of known what type of character Captain Marvel was. So I'm interested to see what the differences are. Like, shooting Endgame, she was still discovering what that character is supposed to be. So I'm wondering if you're going to get what you want, and she might be a better character in Endgame. But we'll see.
Well, we will see, and I think one of the things that I'm a little concerned with is, we talk about power levels. We'll certainly get into that in Infinity War. I think the Russos do a pretty good job, especially when you have someone like Thanos who's at a power level 10. I believe in last week's episode, my analogy was I used letters, like variables, for power levels, whereas you would just use numbers. That'd be way more intelligent. So sorry, listeners, I'm an idiot.
No, they do that in the comics. They do that with mutants.
Yeah.
Do they? Oh, they have like a letter system?
Yeah, they do like alpha... Is it Omega higher than the Alpha?
I don't remember.
I think the Omega is the end all be all, but that's just based on what that word means. So I
think Apocalypse is that.
Yeah, I know that. I think Magneto and Jean Grey are like alpha level.
They're like A class. I feel like you could use any kind of type of system.
Yeah, you could use anything. Yeah,
we digress.
It made up land.
So I think that they'll be able to. I think one of the reasons Captain Marvel works is because her powers are super suppressed during most of the movie, and it's able to end with a spectacular explosion of her being super powered up. So I'm interested to see. I believe that Scarlet Witch and Vision have been a problem as far as power levels go. They kind of just have to either knock the characters out or have them off in the corner or something. But they've been doing a pretty good job. But I'm interested to see what they do with the super. I mean, it's literally the Superman of the universe now. She's like super powerful. Cool. And that leads us into the Russo's movie Avengers: Infinity War.
In time, you will know what it's like to lose. To feel so desperately that you're right, yet to fail all the same. Dread it. Run from it. Destiny still arrives.
Evacuate the city. Engage all defenses. And get this man a shield.
So originally, it was going to be Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And they made the interesting call to make them two separate movies, and I think it was the right call because it kind of contextualizes each movie independently. And we get this giant, I mean, this is, can't be stated enough, this is the most insane thing. Like, just when you thought it was like 2012, we were like, the Avengers is a crazy thing. There was 4 movies, and now we have a super movie. Like, they actually did it. They did a crossover event. This is a crossover event of all, 20-some-odd movies that came before it. This is such an insane feat. Regardless of what you think about the movie or your level of enjoyment of this particular one, it is such a remarkable feat that this movie exists. And it's so insanely reliant on seeing a good amount of the Marvel movies. I mean, if you look at a lot of top lists, like all these tech blog or pop culture blogs they put out, they're like the Marvel movies you need to see to understand Infinity War. It's like 5 to 7 of them, which is a lot of movies.
Yeah, it is.
To really get, and I would say that there is a piece of this entire Infinity War saga. There's a tiny piece in each movie that relates to this, just to how critical it is and how much it'll affect your understanding of the characters. This is insane. This movie is insane just that it exists. Chris, what are your thoughts on Endgame? Or, excuse me, Infinity War. I keep doing
Infinity
this.
War. That's okay. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. It's so crazy that this movie even exists. It still blows my mind that we live in a world where grandmas know who Thanos is. That's just nuts. Like, that's so nuts.
That needs to be a shirt.
My grandma knows who Thanos is.
Some kid about
Hashtag
Thanos.
grandma knows. It's just so crazy, and the fact that Joe and Anthony Russo were able to pull this off, like you just said, Christian, this movie is like the Avengers, the first Avengers on steroids. It's like, hey, we did it once. How about we try to do it again at movie 21? Like, it's miraculous that
it's not just
that
steroids.
exists.
It's crack, PCP, steroids, acid. I mean, it's all. There's so many elements that go into making the. I mean, the diversity is what I'm thinking of. Like the amount of different characters, style of filmmaking, animation. Like it's can't be stated.
Thanos. Like I'm so glad that they took the time to make sure that Thanos worked as a character, not only narratively, but like with the CGI that they used for him. There's not a single moment, and Christian might have other things to say about this, but there's not a single moment in this movie where Thanos doesn't feel like a physical character. Like he's there on set with the rest of the characters. And the moment I realized this, I think, is when he's on Vormir with Gamora, and it's just a single shot of him reacting to just killing his daughter, and the amount of emotion that Josh Brolin is giving to Thanos, like he looks like a real creature. It's so crazy. You can see like the hairs on his head and on his skin. It's so crazy. So that's one of the things I love about this movie, is that they took the care to make sure that Thanos worked as a character. I mean, we could probably do one episode just about Infinity War. I love the first action sequence in New York City. I think it is one of the most comic book sequences in the entire MCU. We have Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Bruce Banner, Wong fighting 2 aliens in New York City. Like, this is the most Marvel we could ever get. And this time around when I watched it, like, I've been reacting to this scene on like I think just like a primal level. Like, I really didn't dissect why I like this scene so much, but I think that's why. It's like, it's all taking place in the streets of Manhattan. Like, for the first time, last episode, we mentioned that we've yet to see Spider-Man swing through New York City. This is the first time we get to see Tom Holland Spider-Man swing through New York City. And my brain was just like overwhelmed with like nerddom. But it's even though the Wakanda battle is cool, like this is definitely my favorite action beat in the whole movie. And then of course Thor's arrival in Wakanda at the end, that's like the best character moment as well in all of the MCU. But
even on my third full viewing, which was this week, it was like third or fourth. I got like when Thor shows up, it was that endorphin rush of like the heroes here, that feeling that we chase when we watch these movies of just getting like just insanely amped. Like
his arrival is like the Avengers 360 shot. Like, it's that level of excitement when he finally arrives in Wakanda.
100%.
Yeah. It's just a good movie all around. They pitted characters together. They put them together in scenes that you would never expect to see together. Like, I never knew I wanted to watch a Thor, Rocket, and Groot movie until I saw this movie. Like, I could go on and on. Victor, what do you think about this film?
When I left it, I was speechless, and I think the first thing someone's like, what do you really think about it? And I was like, I think this is like our Empire Strikes Back for this generation.
It absolutely is.
Like, it hits on such a pop culture level that the snap is going to be replicated and made fun of for years and stuff like that. It's going to be that famous line. The Spider-Man thing's amazing. The Tony Stark and Peter Parker relationship goes up here, and I think it does comics the best justice. It's about Thanos. I think they were so smart to be like, instead of making this a part 1, part 2 cliffhanger thing, this is a movie about Thanos. Like, completely through and through. You're watching his story, and Thor is the hero. So, like, to your point, Christian, like, Thor loses everyone in the beginning, and I think it's brilliant to have your new villain take out your old villain, and the solution to the old villain within 2 minutes of the film. Like, knocks out the Hulk, kills Loki, and you're like, oh, okay, this is really dark and serious right now. And then the way they put everyone back together is amazing. And the reason they fail is because they're all separated from all these other, like Civil War, like the effects of that are huge. I would say my favorite moments definitely, I'm going to just like Spider-Man for sure, Guardians, and then everything with Thanos. I just love, like, I watched this movie I think 4 times already within the past, like, since it's been on Netflix. I just will put it on randomly. It's my favorite, spoilers for my list, my favorite Marvel movie.
Wow. Okay.
Boom. There it is.
High praise.
Table.
An early taste.
Thank
you.
New toys.
It's so stupid. Brian. That's the wrong one. Did not. There was no joke.
I'm just a joke.
I'm going to stop doing sound effects, Brian. Gong it up.
I don't know if that's any better, but crashing into your eardrums here. Horrible.
All right, do your Infinity War recap and survive the sound effects. Go ahead.
I'll try and make it through. I love this movie. This is one of the one of the few that I saw multiple times. I think I saw this 2 times, possibly 3 times in theaters, and then rewatched it once for this. So this is probably around my 4th viewing as well. It's just, I feel like everything is at its peak here. Like, the comedy's working incredibly, the emotional beats all work really well for me. And coming to it this time, having, watched the Guardians movies for the first time, as listeners will know, there's just so much that this is building towards. And you guys mentioned some of my favorite emotional beats. The Tony and Peter Parker bit is incredible here. The Thor and Rocket, even Thanos and Gamora, like you were saying, Chris, like the emotion that's there. It's such it's such a fully fleshed out villain. I think maybe. Obviously, well, Loki versus Thanos, we'll talk about next week who's the better villain. But I think in terms of pure villainy, Thanos is equally. We understand where he's coming from, and he's also horrifying. It's like the logic.
He's a man of such conviction. The conviction he has is
and
terrifying.
Something I really like about this movie, and it's something that I touched on throughout this month talking about these, is the religious allegory underneath this. It's like. It's the inversion of the rapture, right? It's the person who isn't just and isn't taking you to the eternal heavenly realms. He's just coldly wiping out, pure genocidal. And I don't know if this is intentional throughout. It seemed, having watched all this here, there's definitely something going on. But just from the beginning, we see Thanos say, he makes reference to destiny, and he's like, or better yet, I am. And I am is something that, if you're familiar with Christianity, is something that's tied to Jesus in the book of John. And the whole...
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's why that scene was so creepy to me, with his like minion just being like, rejoice, you are chosen. I was like, oh, this is
and
really
he calls it salvation, right?
Yeah.
I love Thanos has hype men. They come like, they're just like, yo, Thanos is coming, bro. This is gonna be the shit. You guys are getting destroyed. But I will say the CG on their characters doesn't work as well for me as Thanos. I think maybe I'll be the Christian of this one. Thanos is incredible. The villains don't look incredible to me.
I think
not amazing.
Unfortunately, kind of taken out quickly. But the dude, the sorcerer,
Ebony Maw
looks incredible. I think he looks super. I think it was really great. Yeah, especially the scenes where he's in New York and he gets like cut with one of the rocks that he's like thrown that got like warped back to him. I think
that is good.
Yeah,
I agree. The female one was
it's more so her. Yeah,
it's jarring. And the big Hulk character is kind of generically.
You can definitely see like their priorities as far as like what they wanted to nail down. Like, other than Thanos, I think Ebony Maw has probably the most dialogue and the most screen time. So like down the chain of CGI that needed to look perfect, Thanos first, Ebony Maw, and maybe Proxima Midnight.
Proxima Midnight.
Mark Ruffalo in a Hulkbuster suit was last.
That was the day before.
It was definitely
release.
last. Yeah, it was definitely last. They were like, oh crap, we need to show Mark Ruffalo's head in a Hulkbuster
Did you see the
suit.
final cut? It's just Mark Ruffalo on the machine. We didn't CGI over it.
On stilts.
His head is so floaty.
I would love a cut of that, of just him in his suit, but like punching the big guy, like with no Hulkbuster, like he has magic powers.
Like they filmed him in those shots. For no
Anyway,
reason.
sorry to digress, Brian.
No problem. A couple other... you guys mentioned how they use Spider-Man, the Russos again here, using Doctor Strange to have portals and him flying around. I am so in for this. Amazing. Like, having played the game Portal, it's one of the few video games I've actually beaten. Or the game Portal.
It's a good one. You could do much worse. That's a good one.
Amazing. Yeah, for sure. But I love that. Also, Captain America catching the scepter, and they coming in with bearded Cap. He's been on the lam. Just gets my heart racing. Absolutely what I'm looking for, and perfect character moment for
You're
for him
like
coming
Captain
back for
America,
me.
that beautiful libertarian superhero.
As we all know.
I am Steve Rogers. Perfect.
That,
straight up.
amazing. Yes.
This is my friend Tree.
All right, Christian, bring it on.
So yeah, like I had said at the beginning, it's crazy this exists, and I would say that for some of the movie's faults, it's like I don't know if it could. After seeing this, I was like, I loved it. I don't know if just as a movie, it's a good movie, like a great movie, because if you just watch this movie, like I'm not sure you would care as much about all the character relationships as much as we do from seeing everything. I don't know if motivations would make any sense. Like, I think Thanos is really well laid out in this movie, and I'm almost like, it's weird that he has so much screen time. I'm almost like, well, with all these movies, he could have easily had this build up in other movies, and then this movie could have been a bit shorter. you know, like, because the movie decides that it's going to be important about him. But I don't, it's like hard for me to wrap my brain around, like, is this a good movie? And then I'm like, what is a good Marvel movie? And we'll get into this a bit later, but I struggle with like what I expect from these movies and what I want them to do and what the artistic merit of them is, because it kind of ranges so much in all these Marvel movies. That being said, I love this movie. It's so great and so enjoyable, but it like makes me question what is a good movie anymore in these. And like, is Endgame going to be good solely because of everything I know and because it's competently made and not a total garbage fire? And we have no way of doing this. Like, who has just seen Infinity War? Like, I want to hear that person's like, I had no idea what the fuck was going on.
I can share with you. So Brett Jarnigan on Go Fuck Yourself saw maybe a third of the Marvel movies and went and saw it.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
He did not see any of the Guardians. He did not see Doctor Strange. He didn't see Cap 1, and he saw the first 2 Avengers. And
those are pretty important, but
he saw like basically everything we've reviewed. And none of the beginning stuff. So throughout the movie, he was asking his girlfriend, like, who's that guy? Why is that raccoon talking? I know who Thor is, but I kind of don't get what's going on with him. Like,
yeah,
he enjoyed the movie to your point. Yeah, but there was a lot of questions, and he was like, he just kind of went along with the ride basically for half of it, which was hysterical. Like I just kept asking him questions like, how. Because I'm kind of jealous, but it's kind of like, I'm like, what? You're like a rare thing.
Yeah, yeah. Even my grandma knows who Thanos is.
Yeah.
Look at my T-shirt.
Dude, you guys have to do some type of episode where he talks about Infinity War. Like, I would love to hear his perspective, having not seen any of those movies.
I think Red Dead Redemption episode, we uncover it, and that's how the episode unravels and ends. Like, gotcha. I believe so. I have to look into it.
Because I know so many people, like with the first viewing, a lot of times I try to see this as soon as possible because I usually work over the weekend and I don't want the movie spoiled in any way. So
yeah.
I'll go see it just by myself. Like, planning is really hard with my schedule and everything. So I'll just go see it. And I saw it opening night by myself. And I was next to a couple, and they were just waiting for Black Panther. And Black Panther had just come out before, and they were like visibly upset that there was so little Black Panther in this movie. And so you have those people that saw that one Marvel movie. They were like, oh, that's so great. And he's, you know, my favorite character's going to be in here. Like, oh man, there is a lot more going on.
And then they kill Black Panther at the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be upset too.
So I think maybe it's that reverse thing where you see it and then you're excited to see the previous stuff. So maybe that's what it does. It's like, oh, I want the answers for this, so I'll dive into it. So it's just such a unique thing in movies, and it's more like a weird TV show that you randomly see the season finale of before you see any of the previous. Like, no one is like, you know what, I'm really into Game of Thrones, but I don't want to watch any. I'm just going to start season 8.
That's really funny you say that. The first thing I saw of Firefly ever was Serenity. I just watched the movie. I had no idea about this cult TV show, and I thought the movie was fantastic because it didn't held your hand. It just like threw you into a universe.
Yeah.
So I honestly really love that movie for that. The show's pretty good too. I went back and watched it. It's the only thing I can kind of relate to in that sense.
And that's pretty unique because there's very little continuity between a TV show and then a movie.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But it's like if there was 5 seasons of Firefly and you're just like, I'm just going to watch the last episode of season 5.
Yeah, it would be completely gone.
It would be so strange, but people do it, right? And so it really brings about how weird this is as a cinematic experience. And it's created, you know, the only consistent thing in Hollywood really is these big IPs that are part of like bringing people out, and it's really sucking up all ticket goers, and it's like the reason people are going to buy tickets to go see it and not wait for it to come out on DVD because they just have to, or video on demand or whatever the kids use to watch movies, and they're just excited to get a hold of it, and that's what's putting butts in seats. And it's really strange, but I have really not talked a whole lot about the movie in particular in my rant, but it's like I can only describe it as I can't believe it even works as a functional movie. Like it never ceases to blow my mind. But so many great moments. Action scenes are great. To your point, Brian, there is some questionable CGI. I don't know why Proxima Midnight has to be CGI. She's like a normal chick with blue skin
with the horns. Yeah.
So
it's probably, I think it's her. It has to do with her height, and then the horns. So she is alien, but she's much bigger than any human character would be. Like, she's humanoid but bigger. So that's
well, they could just make her big, like they did that. Oh wait, you know what? They did do that with Mr. Dinklage, and he looks silly as fuck.
Yeah,
Dinklage is pretty much the biggest thing not working in this movie. It's I can't get past it.
He did take me out of the movie. I will agree with that.
It's his voice.
I really enjoyed seeing him in the movie. I have like the total opposite perspective of you guys.
Thor, you were supposed to protect us. That's exactly how he sounds. That's not even affected.
I'm not going to argue. That.
You were supposed to protect us. So dumb.
During this viewing, I watched it with a friend, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Peter Dinklage was just on a soundstage by himself, surrounded by green screen when he was shooting this,
with noise canceling headphones on, so he couldn't hear himself.
He's shouting.
No feedback.
But
so
I really
question
love...
about this. Sorry, go ahead. Question about this scene. So Groot, gives part of himself to make this handle. Is Groot ridiculously strong? Because he picks up this thing. I don't know if it's comparable to Mjolnir, where only Thor can pick it up. But Chris, you're giving me something.
So this is actually a conversation I had while we were watching the movie this time around, and I hadn't thought about this question up until this viewing when my friend brought it up. But the conclusion that we came to is that Groot's self-sacrifice of his arm in that moment makes him worthy enough to lift Stormbreaker and create the handle. Like, that's never explicitly stated within, like, the lore of any of the films, and they never mention that you have to be worthy to lift Stormbreaker, because we only see Thor pick it up, basically. But, like, that's kind of, like, the conclusion that we came to. Like, in that moment, he was worthy enough to pick up Stormbreaker, create the handle, and give it to Thor.
I like that.
Plus, it wasn't a fully completed weapon, you know.
Exactly.
Without the handle. Where's the handle?
Tree, help me find the handle.
And God, it's such a silly line when he's like,
the throwaway
enough
line.
of that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, the throwaway line Thor does, he's just like, then I'd like to pick it up. He's like, you can't pick it up. You'd pick it up and you're descended to madness, and it would destroy you.
Yeah.
I love that Rocket's like, is it weird that I want to do it more now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something the movie does so insanely well, is characters we've never seen on screen together just coming together and immediately clicking. Like, immediately it's just working, right? And it's not jarring, and I think they do such a good job. The Russos, man, so much credit, and to the entire production team, like, bringing in, like, the elements. Like, the first time we see a, like, title card for, like, a location, because this movie kind of keeps track of things like that, and they've done that in Civil War as well, but it's just, like, space, and it's kind of in the same font they've been using for Guardians, and then that font is consistent on the galactic level, is really smart, because you're dealing with a lot of different styles. And having the Guardians introduced with like a really groovy track, and like having them all singing together, like, it's like blending all of these weird things together. It's so crazy that that it works so well. And I can't speak highly enough to that. Seeing Doctor Strange and Tony, that's such an interesting dynamic between them. Like, they really pit really interesting people together, and it's super cool. And and then it's so good. It's so.
Did I mention the awesome one shot at the beginning of the movie when they're walking out of the Sanctum Sanctorum? That's such a sweet shot.
Yeah, with the car accident, the car runs in, and he's like, make sure they're okay.
Oh,
yeah. It reminded me of Children of Men.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And we rarely see stuff like that in Marvel movies. I just thought it was a really interesting way to follow them through the chaos.
Yeah, where they could have the opportunity to be, like, really efficient, because these are massive productions and they have to get the stuff shot. To, like, have the balls to pull off that shot, like, that's a day. Like, that's a whole day of trying to get that one shot. And you've got to be really, really careful on these giant movies, like, managing your budget and time. Nailing that is so important. So to have the courage to do that, I really respect it, because it's those artful things and that I really appreciate about cinematography. That I wish the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with all the money they have, they did more of, and I feel like the Russos put those shots in and make it count.
Yeah, you're right. They do that in every movie they've been a part of. I can think of, like, some big action piece like Winter Soldier, where the car flips over and he throws the bomb under it. Like it all has really nice physical shots, and also the heroic thing they set up. I think Marvel different from DC. DC gets all this criticism, all this destruction. Avengers 1, we have Captain America giving people orders, saving people, getting people out of the building.
Yeah,
they do that in the beginning of this, right? Spider-Man, Iron Man's main focus is getting the danger away from people.
Yeah, and I think they reckoned with it a little later because this was criticized, and that's kind of what the Phase 3 started with. We talked a little bit about it last week, but Phase 3 literally starts with Civil War, with them reckoning with their destruction and where they've been. That whole movie is kind of about all of that, and so it was really smart for them to be self-aware and constantly be thinking of that and being like, we can't just murder civilizations with that. I mean, they did wipe out 50% of the universe, so... Yeah, I'm also like, one thing about this movie in Marvel that, and I don't think the characters know either, is like, what scale is this on? Is this galaxy? Is this galactic, or is it universe? Because they say the universe, and then Thanos will say, "Oh, you're the strongest person in the galaxy." What galaxy? And is there anything like? I feel like that scale is a little confusing to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I think it's a universal scale.
Yeah, that's what I got about the snap was universal, but I get confused when they're like, well, you know, it's the strongest thing in the universe, and they're like, you're the strongest fighter in the galaxy. It's like, wait a second, what about the universe? And I'm not sure if all of what we see takes place within the Milky Way or what. I'm not sure.
I can't answer that question.
Damn it, Chris. You're supposed to know the answers to these questions.
Nowhere is not in our galaxy, so they show that off, and his planet, Titan, is like out there in a different galaxy, so I think they just use whatever writer.
But did Tony in Strange jump? Was there a portal jump to get to?
To Titan in the ship. The ship jumps them over there.
Okay,
that's where Chris and Spider-Man as an Avenger. That's where they're essentially flying all the way to Titan.
Yeah, I was about to say they got there pretty quick. Then that's a hop, skip, and a jump. A galactic jump. Cool. Any other thoughts on Infinity War? We're all pretty high on it. It's a great
movie.
I think it's all the things that Avengers did and all the fun, but with more weight, you know. And it's like that, like you said, it's like the Empire, and the fact that they have the courage to end it with everybody disintegrating, is just insane. In this like year-long cliffhanger that ends tomorrow for our listeners. For us, we still got a few days, but. Literally, guys, tomorrow, the cliffhanger is over. The sweet, sweet release of seeing however the hell they fix all this. It's very exciting. But
sweet, sweet release.
Sweet, sweet release. But sometimes it's just a little... All right. So, guys, that's Infinity War. And in leading up to our conversation about Endgame, there's a couple things that I wanted to hit on in talking about the overall cinematic universe. And we'll get to our top 5 of overall. But do I say, is there any other successful universes? Obviously not on this scale, but what else can we think of that's not like a trilogy, but like a universe? Mm-hmm. Like Star Wars is really in the beginnings of trying to be more of a universe with the, you know, and they've kind of had that with the subsequent movies in the Skywalker saga, and they have one-offs, but it seems like that's not going to continue. Like, what does make a successful cinematic universe?
You're going to think I'm crazy, but...
The Land Before Time.
I think the only other film franchise, and granted, I haven't seen a lot of these movies, but I've read about a lot of them. I think the Fast and the Furious franchise is probably the closest film franchise to get to something this scale.
Yeah, you're right.
Sure.
Especially with like their spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw, that they're about to release, and like the overall love people have for those films. I'm not a huge fan, but that movie is like, or that franchise is beloved by people. They certainly don't have the number of films that the MCU has, but I think out of any other franchise, if we're taking out like trilogies and stuff like that, like Fast and the Furious would probably be the closest. Like, I don't consider Harry Potter to achieve this. Star Wars, I really don't consider achieving this. Like, there aren't many spin-offs in Star Wars, you know?
The one that comes to mind that's been running the longest, actually, in all film history is the James Bond series. And
right, but those aren't like a lot of those movies are like Elseworld Bond stories, you know, like they don't.
Which leads to my first point about cinematic universes. You have to make the hard decision that you're in it for the long haul and you're going to be a stickler about what's going on, or just don't give a shit. Like, just keep making movies. If they kind of make sense together, they do. If they don't, whatever. Maybe do a couple that are related to each other. You can hire different actors, whatever. It's just the IP that you're selling, and the continuity isn't as important. Or it's the most important thing and what drives you to keep watching the next film.
I think what the most important thing is the quality. Like where all these other people where all these other studios in the last 10 years have failed is that they've seen the Marvel formula, but they've picked up on the wrong elements of the Marvel formula and have tried to clone it. Like DC failed in that they were trying to expedite character development and hopefully create some type of DC cinematic universe. Most of those movies outside of Wonder Woman and now Shazam, which I guess still kind of takes place in that universe, are bad. They're just bad movies. And like you have Universal, they tried to take their
debatable. I don't think they're
okay. Fine, that's my personal opinion that a lot of those movies are bad. But
I think Suicide Squad is bad, and I think that Suicide Squad is the worst of them all.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole
bad that is.
It's a whole pile of shit. But I don't think most of them are outright bad movies. Other than that one, I think they just suffer from particular problems, and they're not fun and
not
lighthearted.
Up to par. Yeah.
Well, I think ultimately they're also not as fun and lighthearted. We talked about all these Marvel movies, and we kept coming back to, well, like Ant-Man and the Wasp, even that movie that I hate, it's still fun. Like, I still watched it and laughed a bunch, right? And a bad DC movie is just a downer, and it sucks. Like, that's really where they're not super strong.
Well, I had a friend of mine, we were talking about it, and you had Batman v Superman that was like, we're going to fuck Marvel. We're going to be dark and gritty, right? And that whole thing presses on these two characters having the same mother's name, where the movie it was going up against, literally the main character's best friend murders the other guy's mom in a Disney movie. And that's the crux of them fighting.
Right.
And that's, again, not the crux of Batman Superman fighting. The crux is they got manipulated by someone to fight each other. But I think
they have the same mother's name.
So I'm a sympathizer. I'm going to push back a little bit on this point because I've heard this argument about character motivations not being well defined. So I think it is comparable, though, because what Bruce Wayne is really angry about is Superman not being regulated, him being this ridiculous force that causes all this destruction without any accountability. And I think that is also the driving theme of Civil War. Maybe not directly between Stark and Cap, but I think there's more there. And the Martha thing, it's undeniably silly, but it's also like I never had that realization until that movie. Just like not actively like, oh, why are the mothers both named Martha?
But was that the moment that you really wanted to realize that?
No, it was really bad. It was just terrible.
Too, and I read almost exclusively Batman comics, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess they have the same mom.
Yeah,
and they do. We don't want to stay on the DCU thing too much, but Batman was interesting in those movies, and they put him in an interesting place. However, Batman didn't even have his own movie as that Batman in that universe, and that's such a weird thing. So it is fucking strange.
They shove way too much in the one movie.
They're just trying to, like you said, expedite characters. So you definitely want to take your time, and you can't just... It's kind of what when I was talking about in the Anthem bonus episode, it's like that game starts off with like this cataclysmic battle, and it's like, who is going to give a shit if you just start off here? And I think that's, the fault of these things that are trying to go. Where Fast and Furious... They weren't trying to do this, and it started off as a very small, intimate movie. The first Fast and Furious movie is about like a cop who's like
it's Point Break.
For
millennials.
But it's not even as crazy as Point Break. And they cut to Fast 9 or whatever they're on, and they're literally on a submarine, like driving a car on a submarine. Like it's crazy. But that movie still like isn't trying to beat anything to the punch, and those movies slowly escalated, and people love them, right? And so I think that's like a super important element of like don't rush character stuff, like what you're saying.
That's what they were trying to do with Iron Man. Like their main goal was just to put out a good movie. Like that end credit scene was just for them. They were like, well, let's do it. If something comes of it, awesome. If nothing comes from it, well, at least we still have a good Iron Man movie.
The only universe to kind of get back to your question I can think of is Star Trek. Out of the original like 5 movies, because granted not all of them are great at all. I think the first one is notoriously bad because it's just long shots of the Enterprise, but they still kind of hold that canon. The only thing weird is when JJ like kind of reverses it, and I'm excluding the Next Generation, but as holding an IP and like, hey, you're going to see basically naval combat in space is what people go for Star Trek for, and also like utopian ideas and science. I think they kind of get that, but it's a TV show, so I don't know if that counts. It's fair,
but it's also not like we get a Kirk movie and a Spock movie and in a
Correct,
horror
yeah.
movie, and then they come together as the Enterprise team in like
That's
the
very
6th
true.
installment. You know, like they're always the crew members of the Enterprise throughout all those films. So that's where like the MCU really sets itself apart, I think, is that like if you really take a step back and look at it, the first phase of the MCU was a bunch of separate franchises that miraculously merged into like a fifth franchise. Like the Avengers itself is its own franchise at this point, which is crazy.
Yeah, they kind of structured it like comic books are structured, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of where it would kind of like fed into its own success and kind of followed its own tradition. I think back to X-Men. I think X-Men has an overall positive cinematic run and went for very long. I mean, what is it? Hugh Jackman is probably tied with Robert Downey now at this point. I gotta imagine with this Endgame coming out, it ties
Playing
him.
the same character.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might have the win still. He played him for 17 years.
Yeah, and if he shows up in Endgame, then no. But he, like they had Wolverine spinoff, and they had the Wolverine spinoffs, and they had more Wolverine spinoffs. But then they did the time jump with different actors, and then brought them together for. I think the only thing in there was the Days of Future Past. Was a particular high point, that and Logan, right? But I think, I think that kind of laid the groundwork for what Marvel was going to do with the Disney stuff. So, that was there, and I think that was successful because casting. I think casting's so huge. They got really good actors and continued to get really amazing actors to be their leads, and I think that's been fundamental in Marvel's success. I mean, their casting in almost every movie has been so good, so on point.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's incredibly hard. Do we want more cinematic universes? Do we?
To be perfectly honest, like I don't.
I don't have the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Neither do I. Here's the deal. Like if a studio were to try and create a cinematic universe now and
Like
take
the
their
hit
time,
Universal Monster Universe.
yeah, I was going to mention that. Like the problem with the Universal Dark Universe that they were trying to create is that they didn't even release the Mummy yet, and they were already like, we're going to have a huge like Universal Monster Universe. And they laid a bunch of groundwork for that universe in The Mummy, and The Mummy was an awful film. It's because they weren't focusing on making a Mummy movie. They were focusing on making like a catalyst film for the rest of this universe that was never going to come to fruition. They even spent time casting the rest of the universe, and they never got to make any of those movies. So
Their
like
eyes were bigger than their stomachs.
Yeah, it's just studios were learning the wrong lessons from the success of
they
the
like
MCU.
these movies because they're all connected. And it's like, no, we like these movies, and then they're all connected, which is awesome. Going
Them being connected is I know this is crazy to say, considering the Endgame's going to be the 22nd film in this huge franchise, but like them being connected is supplementary to the stories that each of these films is telling.
Right. Awesome. What is the? We'll hurry this along because I know we're going a bit long. But what do you think? What does the MCU mean to our culture right now?
I think it mainstream pop culture, and I think the biggest credit, and I think Kevin Feige probably gets enough praise, but to me, I'm fascinated with him because the reason it is successful is because of him. I think I said this last episode. He was there for Spider-Man. He was there for X-Men. Kind of watch it all build, and he's a fan of comics. And he made comic book movies like you would comics. And I don't think you can replicate that. Fast and Furious gets there because Vin Diesel saw that and had the same idea, like what if they all were connected, and started, I don't know, writing them over a weekend. I don't know, but but whatever. Like if they're big, and like to Christian's point, they're big events. Like I think movies studios, what that does to the art form is harder because you're trying to make them an events, but also Nolan does the same thing too with his movies. They're like, I made this in the 70s, like it's on 70mm film, and like none of the actors have a script, and then they're on a beach fighting, and then they think they're in real war. Like I think filmmakers are having to get more creative to get people to go to the movies, because I won't go to a movie for a typical rom-com. Like most movies, I'll just wait for it to get on Netflix or something like Dumbo, for example. I'm not running to theaters to go see what happens in Dumbo, and it's not a bad movie. It's just
Nobody's
it's not
running.
an event.
They're flying.
Nobody's running. They're flying. Soar into theaters. But yeah, that's what I would say. It's just I don't think you can replicate this. I think so many people have tried, and we've seen it just fail. that I think behind it all is just that it's like comics and it works for this IP, and this IP like staples it. And I think it made everyone okay to be a nerd. Like, it really mainstream like nerd culture.
Definitely.
And yeah, exactly. To that point, like something kind of spanning the last question and this one, I think it helps that even though they're not pulling direct storylines, there's so much content with these characters who have been fleshed out in such detail over time that, speaking to modern cinematic universes, adaptations, they've always been popular. I think they're getting more and more popular. People know a story will sell, and then they'll recreate it for mass audiences. I think something that makes this stand alone is pulling these characters, incorporating them in different ways. Obviously, there was a Thanos Infinity Gauntlet run that was not exactly like this, but you can pull from 4 or 5 different arcs and incorporate different elements into this. And there's a quote from Birdman that I meant to look up, but essentially, like, there's this idea where one of the Birdman with Michael Keaton, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but
that's a great movie.
Great movie. There's an interview scene where one of the interviewers says something like, he's quoting a philosopher, and he says something along the lines of, the stories that used to be the stories that religion used to tell are now in comic books and advertisements, or something like that. And I feel like there's such an element of that here, where we're seeing kind of archetypal characters portrayed on screen that we can follow, build up mythos around them, build up a real cosmology. And I think in this age, Christian, you had mentioned in one of the previous episodes that we're living in a time that is, is very understandably pro-science and kind of stepping back, becoming more secular in terms of human history. And I think this is something that kind of plays on that edge of looking for mythos within the world and building something when it's not necessarily something we're getting from the rest of our culture at large.
Yeah, we're creating our own contemporary American mythology.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Americans' pantheon of gods and heroes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that you see that with young children and how people literally dress up as them. Adults dress up as them, probably more than children, and go to conventions. And I really think for better and for worse, people have replaced this kind of thing with like their religion and their community. And that's like a strong thing that, like, it's crazy that it's what people want to be included and want to feel like they're together. And I think that this does that, and it does that to such a broad audience. I mean, I think it always did it in the comic books, but as someone who, the comic books are really overwhelming. There's a lot of them, right? And what are you going to spend your time reading? And it's like this very strange medium if you didn't grow up reading them. So to bring it to the big screen and do it something as a traditional as the American cinema, and it be the thing that really is driving American cinema today, I think it's insanely important to our culture. And I think it's why I was talking with a friend of Go Folk Yourself, Dan Kay, about I was talking about these movies, and I was talking about our podcast and how we talk about them. And he goes, well, what are you expecting? Like, are you expecting art? It's like, it's a superhero movie. And I said, yeah.
Roast.
I said, yeah, kind of, because we've gotten there. And, these movies, I really do demand a lot from a movie that is getting almost all the eyeballs of America and is run by one of the biggest corporations and has some of the most prolific directors and actors of our time participating in. Yes, I put a huge responsibility on that. Although it needs to be fun and make a lot of money, this is what people look to. And it is kind of like, there's literally kids that are going to be like, when I was growing up, I'd say, and I was very religious, but I would still go like, well, what would Spider-Man do? And Spider-Man was such a noble character to me, and was just a young, nerdy kid who was trying to figure out how to balance his work and his life and try to do the right thing. And that was really important for me. Despite all the religion that I actually had, Spider-Man was way cooler and was more modern for me, right? And so that's what this is. And I think that Marvel and Disney have done mostly a good job, but when it comes to things like, Doctor Strange and talking about spiritual or mysticism and stuff like that, when it comes to representing minorities and things like Black Panther, when it comes to showing women empowerment, like, these things are going to say stuff and make people think, and I think the platform of it makes it that much more powerful. And it is an insane responsibility. And to answer Dan K's question, that is what I expect. These are adults that are making these, and this is insanely important to kids and people of our generation. And not to get too rambly, but that's kind of what I see the MCU as. It's one of the most beloved, important American pieces of culture we have right now.
No, I completely 100% agree with you. Like, because it's so mainstream, and even before these films were mainstream, like, comics are meant to add something to our lives. They're supposed to show us something and present these stories that we can strive to be better people, or see different races on the page of a comic book and feel inclusion. Like, if the art's not saying anything, then it's worthless. So whether it's as simple as like inspiring a child to overcome a great challenge, or bringing to light maybe a more topical issue like in Black Panther, like, it has to say something. It has to inspire us in some way, or it's worthless. So I hope Endgame is able to do that.
Segue.
Yeah.
And I think, just lastly, before we get on to what we want from Endgame, I think one of the other important things is like how apolitical the Marvel Cinematic Universe is. I think it says a lot of political messages, but I'd also say that it's something that I find that among people and friends and peers that have disagreeing views on very potent social issues, I feel like a lot of people like Marvel. It's something that does bring us together as a culture, and it's really nice to have things in this world that all people like will bicker about which movies are better and whatever.
Yeah.
It's a positive force for people to have a collective interest, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm happy that the Marvel fandom hasn't become tainted yet, like the Star Wars fandom has. That's so toxic. Yeah. I mean, I love Star Wars, but that fandom is so toxic by comparison to like what you just said.
Well, I think part of the benefit is the amount of movies too, and there's just a lot of different characters, and they're able to tackle some of these things with characters that have different opinions and motivations and backgrounds and cultures, and I think that's ultimately what is going to lead to this being successful in the future, because it's as much as, I mean, this hugely popular IP. Endgame's going to come out. We're going to talk about what we want from it, but I would say that the future is questionable for Marvel and Disney of how long it will maintain cultural relevance and impact after finishing something like the Infinity Saga. So how do we want the Infinity Saga to wrap up? As it's now known, all the movies we've talked about literally every movie. We're about to go see Endgame. What do we want from it? What will make that movie great in our minds? Victor?
A solid end, and I mean by characters passing away, characters retiring, whatever, like a solid full ending where you can see like where Tony started and where he is now. And that's cool if they bring him back in like 2 movies or something for like a cameo, but I think that would be really satisfying to see certain characters like either put the cape away or whatever, or they pass on, like something really. I think the Russos have a chance to really impact but also inspire as well, and I think there's a whole group of superheroes like Captain Marvel, Spider-Man that are ready to take up the mantle, and these ones can kind of retire for a bit. So I'd be excited to see that, because when Cap in the comics goes away, Falcon steps up to the mantle, Bucky steps up. I'd like to see that, like a whole universe that's with diverse characters filling in those roles and kind of doing the Bond thing where like it is a Captain America movie, but it's not the same person playing it.
Right. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I completely agree that like there needs to be some type of definitive end marker in this movie, just so we can see the character arcs completed, so that's all I really want out of it, without going into like the details.
Brian? I want an intermission.
I think everyone does.
I know I'm not going to get that, though. I'm really just kind of going in blind. I haven't given it too much deep thought because I don't really want to disappoint myself going in. I had so much fun with Infinity War. I'm really just excited to let them show me what they're going for. Like you were saying, Victor, I am ready for characters to step down, whether they kill people off or even like do some sort of like universal reboot where we get into like an alternate universe where you can have a whole different set of characters potentially that haven't been introduced thus far. Definitely excited to see characters like Captain Marvel, who has so much more to dive into her character, Spider-Man, who loved his own movie. We'll see how the second one goes, but it's hard to get tired of Spider-Man stuff for me. Emotionally, I don't know what to expect here. It's like the end of Infinity War was so much that I feel like they're gonna try and end positively here, but I don't know if that's gonna be the best, if that's gonna be fulfilling or not.
Will it be a mixed bag? I mean, I remember seeing Tony Stark get stabbed through the chest by Thanos, and I thought that was the end. And the feels. Yeah, I got the feels again watching it, oh my God, he was almost gone from us. I am so emotionally attached to every single one of these characters. That they have the ground, the foundation to just wreck my soul, and I hope they do it a little bit. I want it. Let us feel some loss. We have to
honestly, that distraught feeling, I think, is what's going to help Endgame be long lasting. People love Star Wars because they're deeply connected to the characters in that universe. I think this it already has achieved that same level.
And it's already made $150 million before it even opens.
I know.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty crazy. I want my theater to be respectful, and I'm seeing it opening night at
They won't be
at a college movie theater. It's
you're crazy. I used to go to that one all the time.
It's gonna be interesting as long as people aren't hooting and hollering is good, and that's one of the great things is the event aspect of it, and I'm sure that's gonna be a good time. I'm taking my lady who's not super involved in the MCU movies. She's seen probably less than half of them. She's seen all the important ones, and she's seen Infinity War. So I'm excited to see her reaction too. She did not handle Spider-Man in the Spider-Man's her favorite superhero, so she did not handle that well in Infinity War.
It's rough.
No one did.
So how do they?
Dude, I felt nauseous after watching that scene for the first time.
All right, I think we're all very excited. So let's do it, guys. Before Endgame, let's put together our top 5 Marvel movies. We've been doing our top 3 or so in each of the sections. This is for all the cojones. Top 5, Victor.
So I'm going to go with Thor Ragnarok in 5, Spider-Man Homecoming 4, just because they nailed that. I'm going to go with controversial one, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So I think 1 is a better movie, but 2 has so many scenes that I love from it so much, and the last act I think just saves it for me. It did something different.
Did you like it your first time watching it?
Yeah, that was one of the rare Marvel movies where I went and watched it a couple times. I went and saw it again.
Yeah, listeners will know, and if you listen to last week's episode, I 180'd on that movie. I hated it, and then I rewatched it for this as my first full rewatch, and fell in love with it, and was like, "Wow, how did
really?
This is so emotionally powerful," and so I respect that choice.
Yeah, the part of him just where he gets revealed that you killed my mom, and his reaction to that, I think, is great, and sets up that character to do what he did in Infinity War.
Yeah, for sure.
Have to give it up to Civil War because it's the unofficial Avengers movie that just was amazing. It nails every character. So to give some backstory, Civil War was my first me buying my own comic. So this movie, that was my Tony Stark, the Tony Stark that was overprotective, a mentor to Spider-Man, and was at odds with Captain America. And that was my Cap, where he was standing up for what's right, doesn't matter what his government says. And I think the setup with Hydra was amazing. So all of that into one movie and how they pulled that off was amazing. And I think they got the right guys to write it and direct it and to do this movie as well. And top one, I said it earlier, is Infinity War, for all the reasons we just said the past hour.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great list.
Yeah,
I can write list. Chris, I know you put together your top 20, so if you want to start listing them off.
I'll only do top 5. I was uncomfortable with my number 5. I'm sticking to it, and that's really the only reason I did the top 10, just to quell my OCD. But with number 5, I put Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Ooh, wow! The sleeper hit this whole run.
Yep. Yeah. My number 4 was the Avengers, the first Avengers.
Okay.
My number 3 is Avengers: Infinity War. 2 was Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Oh wow!
And then number 1 was Captain America: Civil War.
Ooh, Civil War taking
calves.
2.
Yep.
Taking top 1 of 2 of our people that are on the show.
I'm pretty stoked that Victor also had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in his top 5, though.
That's a surprise. That's a surprise to me. That's surprising.
I had to take a walk and think about that for a while. It bothered me because, like, one to me as a film, I think is great and amazing, but Baby Groot.
It was tough for me too because it just inched out Thor Ragnarok, which I love.
Yeah.
Like Thor Ragnarok didn't crack my top 5, and that was like a kind of a problem for me, you know? But because that movie's so good, right? It deserves to be in a top 5, but I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 just beat it out by a little bit.
These lists change sometimes, you know, depending on the day where you're at. Now, we just watched all of them, so it's a pretty good level, good even level, because we've seen all of them. Brian, give it to us.
So I'm bad at these types of lists. I feel like right after I say this, it's going to change, but I'm going to give it to you as it is right now. Number 5, Iron Man 1. I love that movie. I think the way it kicked things off and the development of Tony Stark's character and what's happened with him, it's iconic to me. So that's my number 5. Number 4, going with Black Panther. I like this movie from the beginning. Rewatching it, I feel like the more I rewatch this, the more I'm gonna love this movie. Number 3, same as you, Chris, Infinity War. Or
awesome.
Was that Victor? Okay, yeah.
No, that was me. Yeah.
Number 2 is it did make it, Thor Ragnarok.
Ooh,
and
nice.
Off the top.
Number 2.
Two's a good spot for that movie.
And number 1, loyal listeners will not be surprised by this, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That is my jam.
Dude, that is like the most, I mean, obviously it's Brian's list, but that is the most Brian-y list I've ever heard.
Yeah, that fits
perfectly. All good choices, yeah.
I wanted to shout out, too, you put Black Panther in there. I'm glad one of us did.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't mention this. So I just want to give it a quick shout out. Yeah, that soundtrack is so good. I know you had mentioned it, Chris. You thought Drake did it or some stupid shit like that. But
yeah, I'm so dumb. Kendrick Lamar, I'm sorry if you're listening to our podcast. I love what you did with the Black Panther soundtrack.
The Afrofuturism and the old school like rhythmic beats with like newer school like trip hop. Trap beats and stuff. It's very, very cool, very apropos of the film, and I think that's one of the strongest elements of it. Cool. I just want to give that a shout out. Didn't feel like I gave it enough love because that is a super awesome element. All right, guys, this won't surprise anybody that's been listening as far as what my top one is, but this was hard to do, and I had to go. These are my favorite. I basically justified it as if I could only have 5 movies of the Marvel, if I could only watch these 5, right? And I think that's a healthy way to do it. And this was really hard because I have realized that as much as I've shit on a lot of these movies, I love a lot of these movies, and they make me happy when I watch them. As pretentious of a douchebag I am. Number 5 is Winter Soldier, Captain America. Just because, the Russos can do no wrong, as we'll see with this list. Russos are the best directors, and that movie is so good to prove what they could do. And I think Bucky's such a badass. The Winter Soldier's so awesome. For Iron Man, as much as I have trouble with the third act, like the original Iron Man started this whole thing. It set the tone of these movies. It is the template on which most of these movies follow. And it's just so fun, and Robert Downey's so amazing, and the way he introduces that character, he is 100% from the very get-go. I love the special effects in that movie. They still hold up. I love Iron Man's suit design, and and I never knew who Iron Man was before I started it, so it's like a crazy thing that movie was so effective. That's a classic. I've seen it a billion times. Third is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the first one. I believe it's not called Volume 1, but Guardians of the Galaxy End. I do think that the second one has a bit more emotions, but this first one is just such a tight film, and all the characters are so great, and I think it's better paced than the second one. As much as I would say emotionally, my heart is in the second one because I recent love for that movie, but can't be the first Guardians. Best set design in the entire MCU, by the way. Like that whole all the spaceships and costuming, it's like the best. Second is Marvel's The Avengers. Just one of the best cinematic experiences that I've ever had in my life. So, that proved to me all this was possible and worked. Flawed movie, but again, if I had to be on a desert island, I'm taking that one. And then 1 is Captain America: Civil War because it's the best Marvel movie.
Nice.
You know, Brian, we were talking about pacing issues with it, or Marcus was really nailing on. Oh, this movie's fun, then it's serious, then it's fun. That's kind of why I love it. It's kind of what the weight of all the Marvel movies with a lot of the lightheartedness, and I enjoy that. It has the best action set piece. Action set pieces. My favorite action set pieces are all in this movie, for all the reasons I said in the previous episode. But that airport scene is just the most fun you can have in one of these movies. It's so ridiculously fun. So I give it up to Civil War. Captain America taken first on all of our list in one way, shape, or form. And Civil War, 3 out of Russo brothers, Captain America. That's apparently what all our jams are.
Yep. Dude, or Marcus and McFeely, because they're the ones that wrote them. So they're like.
Although you said Infinity, excuse me, you said Infinity War for your number 1, Victor. I'm sorry.
But still, it's up there.
I mean, Captain America's still in it,
but
he's not really the main character.
But Will, if Endgame has more Cap in it, that's still Russo's. That might take your first spot. We'll see. But the Russo is obviously the best thing that has happened in the Marvel Cinematic Universe overall.
Yeah.
Guys, I like those lists. They're good. I would watch all those movies. I don't think any of you guys picked bad movies. None of you said Iron Man 3. So,
dude, I was waiting for Iron Man 3 to be on Brian's list.
It was going to be on Chris's list.
I was looking it up online, and I think I didn't even see it in the official list of MCU anymore. So,
no. It's been dusted.
It's now officially I told you guys, it's now officially the holiday special for the MCU. Like, I'm telling you, I don't know why you don't see that.
Separate Wikipedia page.
Hold on, I'm looking up. This is like a thought right at the onset. But could you guys guess what has the worst Rotten Tomato score of all the MCU movies?
Thor: The Dark World.
Incredible Hulk.
You guys took my choices.
Incredible Hulk and Thor:
1.
The Dark World are tied. For 67%.
So there's one worse than that?
No, they're tied at the bottom, I think. Everything is
both,
okay.
At 67%?
Tied at 67. 70% approval for Hulk, and then Thor: The Dark World gets 76, so technically it's the Incredible Hulk. Iron Man has 79%. It's a crime against Iron Man 3 has 79%. That's
I agree.
That's total shit.
It's the only Marvel movie I walked out of mad. Like, I was just like, I'm gonna,
All right, which one has the highest?
Black Panther.
Did I say Black Panther?
It is Black Panther.
All right.
Of course.
Black Panther has 97%. That's crazy.
Dude, that is
I will
so
say,
That's great.
these are great movies, but I tend to think their Rotten Tomato scores are overblown, especially in comparison to the DC movies. Yeah. Like, the worst DC, or the best DC movies a lot of times have worse scores than the worst Marvel movies. Something's weird there. I'm sorry. DC's
no.
It's a government scam.
I think that in terms of
it's a government conspiracy.
On terms of 1 to 100%, it's kind of the Rotten Tomatoes is always just kind of a weird score. It never really makes sense to me. Unless those breakout films that are just like, man, we have not a set IP, and then they're getting 100% wide release. I mean, that's always a good thing to like direct. Oh, I should be interested in that movie, but when it comes to just these big blockbuster movies, it's just kind of a shit show.
Yeah, I heard that Cinema Score is actually the most accurate because they poll people right as they're coming out of the movie at theaters, and it's over opening weekend. So like they're getting people's like initial gut reaction for the film right after seeing it. And then they like give it a letter grade based on all those reactions.
That's why I'm super excited for Endgame. Is the first time we're going to be doing this, and like our critical eye will be kind of fresh. I mean, to be fair, I'll probably still. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to read and listen to film reviewers on this. I probably will. But I'll try to like record my thoughts separately before that to get a pure representation, because I feel like ultimately my opinion and a lot of people's opinions get shaped by friends and critics, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You always get that weird disjointed feeling if you walk out of a film and you're like, man, that was great. And then it's just like a 2%. You're like, what the fuck? Like, what was I smoking? That's crazy. All right, guys. So that pretty much does it. Victor, do you want to plug your podcast one more time for us?
Yeah, you can check out Go Folk Yourself every other Thursday at Go Folk Yourself Podcasts. You can subscribe, all that good stuff. Smash that bell. I don't know how any of this works. We don't either. It just magically pops up on the internet. Thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I love just talking about all this stuff with you guys. So this is fantastic.
Yeah,
I usually get shut down 2 minutes into this on my show. So
I'm glad. I feel like it was fitting, Victor, that you came back for this episode because you started this journey with us and you ended it with us.
Oh yeah, that's
like
true.
You're bookending our
No,
journey
he's not.
through the.
We're
Marvel
watching
Cinematic
Endgame.
Universe.
Oh, you're Endgame, yeah.
I'm talking about our retrospective. Like, thank you for coming back. For
Looking
this
back
episode.
at the lore, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming back, and thank you for bearing with us. Sorry, we're going a little long.
No,
again.
this is great.
As per usual. Guys, thank you so much. All of you, my regular co-hosts, my vanilla co-host, and our special guest, Victor Paugh. We appreciate it. You can check out my music on Apple Music and Spotify and all those places. Bandcamp at midnightsatire.bandcamp.com. And the album is Bad Karaoke. You can find those things. Guys, thanks so much, and have a great week.
Have a great week. Enjoy Endgame.
So excited. Consume consciously, everyone.
It's the final countdown. Endgame. Endgame. It's an endgame. It's an endgame. Pop.